Cedric Gates is more than just a state representative. He's a dedicated champion to District 45, Waianae, Hawaii. I think this is the first publicly elected official politician I've ever had on this channel, and my ignorance is on full display. I'm gonna just be real with you. Like, I took this opportunity to educate myself, and I hope this is an opportunity to educate yourself as well, especially if you live on the west side of Oahu, Hawaii. Once we get past the sort of technicalities behind politics in Hawaii, voting in Hawaii, then we get to who Cedric is as a person. In short, he's from Waianae and he advocates for Waianae. For those of you who don't know, Hawaii is one of those places where we love to represent for our people. Anybody makes it anywhere, we represent for them. It's a kind of a community rooting. It's just built into us. And Waianae is a bit special within that framework. Representing for Waianae is a thing. And I think being from Waianae is what helps Cedric keep his deep connection to his, 25,000 constituents. In this episode, we talk about the tricky balance between professional and personal, how his projects affect his community, as well as the changes he'd like to see. Of course, being from the West Side myself, I'm interested in the tangible results that Waianae residents can expect to see. Not just the things that we hear, but we don't really connect with, like certain things like environmental challenges or sustainable tourism or innovative approaches to tackling the district's affordable housing crisis while preserving its cultural heritage. It's a lot of wordy things that really just go over the head of a lot of us. And so I really try and dig into the tangible results that people can expect. Cedric Gates has a vision for Waianae's future that goes beyond politics. It's a vision built on collaboration, communication, sustainability, and most of all, empowerment. His dedication to fostering community connections and celebrating the rich cultural tapestry of Waianae has made him a trusted leader, committed to ensuring that the people of District 45 thrive in an environment that honors their heritage and embraces progress. And once I thought we were finished, we had a set change and restarted our conversation because...
So what we call it at the legislature is dual use, so both medical and recreational use of cannabis.
For those of you who know me, you know that as soon as I left Hawaii, I spent 5 years in Portland, fucking Oregon. So you know I'm an advocate for marijuana. And so you can imagine how stoked I was to hear it straight from State Representative Cedric Gates, all about the legalization process in Hawaii, where it's at, what were the holdups, and what we can expect in the near future. After all, Cedric Gates is the one who introduced the bill to allow adult use of cannabis outside of the medical program, which is recreational or dual use. I forgot, you'll hear about it, all that stuff in this episode. So this is kind of a two-part episode. Part one being the traditional conversation between Cedric and I. Part two being solely focused on legalization of cannabis in Hawaii. I hope you enjoy this one. More importantly, I hope this episode encourages you to get more involved in your community. Look, I'm guilty. I do it too. It's easy to get sucked into the narrative of someone, somewhere. But what are you doing for the person next door? I always try and pick a color that I feel like matches the guest.
You're right.
Like right now, I was just talking to my wife about this. Like, this landscape is so familiar to me, right?
Yeah.
And like this time of the year, like end of summer, beginning of fall, it's just this yellow, brown, like west side. It's like, this feels like west side to me. Everything out that window to me. I was like, so I tried to I was like, oh, two west side guys, let's put this like orange kind of look, because it's very different from like Hula. You know what I mean? Kahuku or something.
Luscious.
But this is, it's kind of like our things.
Okay. Thanks for that insight.
Yeah. So, I mean, hey, Cedric brought out, thanks for coming. I thought, we definitely want to get into, I think there's some kind of personal overlap in our stories. You know what I mean? Like being from the West Side, being who we are ethnically as well, that, we can get into a little bit as well. But I think we should just start, like, give me a snapshot of who you are today. Who's Cedric Gates?
Yes. So, aloha, I'm Cedric Gates, and I appreciate you having me on your show. I've been watching you and in your podcast, and I've really been amazed at the work that you do and lifting up the voices across our state and in our community. And thank you for having me on the show today. So, I'm born and raised on the Waianae Coast, Makaha to be specific. I've went to Kamaili Elementary, Waianae Intermediate, Waianae High School, So really entrenched in the community and everybody's family on the west side. You know how small our community is and tight knit our residents are with each other. And, that's kind of my background in terms of my upbringing. When I was 12, my life changed forever. I lost my mom on Halloween, actually, and it was strange. It was realization like, whoa, life is short, and you gotta love the people that you love and show them their flowers while they can still smell them, and that changed my whole perspective on life. My mom was someone that kept me involved in school, made sure I got straight A's, and rewarded me when I was going to school when she was still alive. And when she passed, I kind of lost that. And that's kind of where, I was hanging out with the wrong crowd, I guess you can say. Started cutting school, being a, bad boy with all the bad kids somewhat. And, I came to a realization that path wasn't what was destined for me. I knew that I needed to make a change so that I don't get stuck in a generational rut where, we ended up doing the same things that we promised ourselves we wouldn't do. So with that being said, growing up in Waianae was rough. I've don't come with the silver spoon. I've definitely came from the bottom, and my parents were hard workers. They were business owners and entrepreneurs, and they kind of instilled that into me. What I thought was really important was that they always showed us to show aloha, right? Give back, do what you can, because it always comes back 100 times.
What kind of businesses did they do?
So they had pawn shops and a cleaning business. So they had 2 pawn shops, one in Anakuli, one in Maili. Prior to that, they had a pawn shop in Waiawa. But that's why we moved to Waianae before I was born. They ended up opening up shops out here. So that's what drew them to the Waianae coast. And that's how we ended up being born and raised out here.
You said we, so you have
siblings. Yeah, so I have 2 brothers and 1 sister, all older than me. I'm the youngest.
Hey, out of baby too.
Hey, there you go. There you go.
Okay.
Yeah, so basically from there, I ended up finding a path. I started a nonprofit organization with my brother Ben, and we were focusing on community unity through an active lifestyle. And that drew us into politics because we used the city parks, and the city parks would always be messed up. The bathrooms would be tore up, and you're trying to hold an event there. You don't want to be having your participants dealing with unnecessary stuff. And so we started advocating for that, and that's what kind of drew me into the politics because I started speaking up for our community. And
it started from these public public parks.
Yes.
And then wanting to throw events there with your brother.
Yes.
And you're like, let me start this NPO, but I want to make it more, I would say, hospitable for our guests who come to these events.
Correct.
And you couldn't find a space. Is that?
Yeah, we had a space. It was just the conditions of the public spaces that were issue for us because, the sinks would be broken, the toilets would be broken, and then you can't have, these events successfully if, there's lines at the bathroom or people can't use the bathroom.
Not enough parking, or maybe I don't want to park there type of thing.
Right.
For me, like my exposure to a lot of the West Coast, I mean, a lot of people don't know Honokai, first of all. You know what I mean? Like sometimes I just say Kapolei. And I went to Ewa Beach actually I went to Campbell for high school.
Oh, okay.
So I'm old, I guess, if you want to say, because like everyone's like, how come you didn't go Kapolei? You know what I mean? Yeah, see? Well, I'm the dinosaur from Kapolei who went to Ewa Beach.
Okay.
03. So everybody 03 Campbell, you know what's up. Like, especially if you live Makakilo, Kapolei, like we passed Kapolei High School getting built on our way to Campbell every day. Wow. And so like we're looking at this field like, man, that's a nice field. Damn, they got big buildings that guarantee have AC. You know what I mean? So we're passing this, going to school, coming back, and we see Kapolei High School getting built, hurricanes, like, but we're not going there. We went Campbell. But a lot of my exposure to the island as well was through soccer. So I was heavy into soccer. You know, I played t-ball and baseball, like growing up here, Kamakila Park, like everywhere. But soccer was really the one that, for me as a young child growing up, and I realize now how influential it's been on my life to this day. But it got me to see different places at the island, which to me might as well have been the world. Right. You know what I mean? So I'm going to all these different places far away, falling asleep on the way there, like Kaneohe, game in Kaneohe, game Wailua, game Waianae. So like when you say parks and stuff, I'm like, yeah, that's how I know this island from a young age is, that field over there is super muddy. Right. You know what I mean? Or that field over there is dry. Don't you ever slide tackle over there. You know what I mean? Like, that's how I know, or at least I would say it was intro to a lot of this island through the soccer fields, through the parks, parks and recreation. Mm-hmm. So I know when you like rolling the dice, first time at a field, you got to go shishi, you go in the bathroom, like, oh man, good thing I got a shishi. Cause
yeah.
That's why I hit a nerve with me. I was like, oh, man, I know what you're talking about.
For sure.
I know.
And that's the things that matter to people. You know, I try to, as a government official, and we'll get back to my story later, but as a public official, that's when I view our responsibility as government is to provide the things that people care about the most, whether it's roads, whether it's the public parks and beaches, trash pickup, potholes. Yeah. These things are what people care about and have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. And if we address those issues, the quality of life of many of our residents improve dramatically. And that's how we have greater impact in our work as elected officials and as government.
And so what is your title today? Because I checked on YouTube, everything, and I've seen it change. So kind of, what's your title today? What's your title's been?
So I'm the state representative for Waianae Coast, District 45, which encompasses Makaha, Makua, and Waianae.
Makaha, Makua, Waianae. So not Maili, Nanakuli.
No. So there's this thing called, it's called redistricting. Okay. So when redistricting happens, it's every 10 years based on the census. So we do a census. Every house district has about 25,000 residents that they represent in the house district. So Waianae did get bigger and more population. And so my district was then drawn to fit the 25,000, which ends at Waianae Comprehensive Health Center. So that's the line on that canal.
Okay. I know. Okay. Yeah. Was it Ka'aina? Yeah. Yeah, that's that was being shout out.
Yes, we definitely use them a lot for catering.
So, state representative of District 45, Waianae,
correct,
is who Cedric Gates is, right?
Correct.
And this is a publicly elected position. Correct.
Yes. So I've been running since 2014, and I got in 2016. I ran 2014. My father passed away. I pulled papers on a Friday. And my dad passed away that Sunday. And that was a, shock. It was unexpected. And he was my biggest supporter. So, getting dealt that terrible hand was also just an adversity that I knew I had to get through. And in honor of my father, I continued my campaign even though I was struggling to process all of what just happened, right? But I knew that he would have wanted me to keep going. He wouldn't have wanted me to put on my campaign on hold. But it was just a whole different ball game from when I was coming into this election, that 2014 election, because I had my biggest supporter. So I felt like I had all the mana I needed to go out there and conquer the world. And then you take that away, and it's like, whoa, reevaluate. How do you move forward? Do you move forward, right? And all these existential questions that you got to ask yourself.
Deep questions, guaranteed.
Deep questions, for sure. And I was 20 at the time. So, it was definitely a hard thing to process, but we got through it. And I ended up losing that first election. But one of the greatest lessons that my father taught me was that a loss is never a loss. It's always a lesson. And when you do take a L, you need to find that lesson in that L that you take and use it to strengthen who you are and your character and be able to find a way and a path forward, so you can still succeed in what you're doing.
Is that something that, I mean, I don't, being from like West Side, and that's kind of where I was getting to, is like a lot of people, one, don't know Honokai, so sometimes I just say Kapolei. I literally remember the moment that Honokai Hale was put on the map.
Yes.
Because it wasn't always on the map. And then it was like, boop, here's your dot. It says Honokai Hale. So like sometimes like when I just say Kapolei, or, you know, you meet somebody, where are you from? And then whatever you say after that comes with a lot of, you could say, stigma, stereotype, ideas, you know, archetypes, right?
100%.
So when you say something like Waianae or even like West Side, a lot of that baggage that comes with that includes like grit, right?
100%.
So this sort of, and I think the landscape is kind of reflected in the landscape of this, I don't want to say rugged, but like hardened by the elements kind of feeling you get when you look up at the mountains, right? Red, hard rocks, this grass that it looks like, it might be, someone told me too, like, oh, all this grass dead. I'm like, it's not dead. Wait till it rains. Watch this valley in, you know, February, come back in February and look, it's going to look like the east side, right? So I feel like that kind of is like part of us growing up on this side. And what you just said about what your dad, you know, he's still here because you still hold on to that lesson, keep finding the lessons in the L's. And do you think maybe your path, or how do you think your path would have been different? Let's say if your mom and dad decided to stay in Waihoa, or you decided not to start this NPO with your brother and do events at these parks. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I feel like right now, today, you can say these things and it's probably a good thing
100%.
where you are, but like, you think you would have been doing, how would it have changed if you weren't had that West Side grit?
Right. So I think, you know, Waianae has definitely taught me so much in just people. I think that's the biggest thing, because Waianae, we have that sixth sense where we can read people's vibes and we can see what type of energy you're bringing to the table, what type of mana you're coming with. And that gives us the ability to kind of give a good judgment on a person. And so I think that's one of those things that continue to serve me. Cause you know, there's 100, what did Jay-Z say? There's 125 characters in these streets. You know, talking about tweets, but that's the truth. And kind of when you're growing up here, I go to the Capitol now, and you see the same characters you would see in the streets of Waianae. And
At
you
the
deal
Capitol.
with the same, you deal with the same guys. So, same people. And that's what has helped serve me well, because there's certain ways you deal with certain people, right? And that's how you try to use your best judgment in terms of who you keep around you, right? For example, or who can you bring in to work on certain projects to help move things forward, and who can build relationships, who can do, all these different skill sets that these different people also have, and trying to figure out where their role is in all of this bigger picture.
So you, boom, Waianae, elementary, intermediate, or middle, and then high school, right?
Yeah.
The whole whatever 13 years that is.
Yeah.
So reading people is something I'm getting from this, what you just said, right?
Great.
And now when you apply that to the state capitol, what the biggest parallel, what would you say it is? Because to me, it sounds like, especially as a politician, it's power, the power difference. So you can read who has the power in the streets, the influence in the streets, right? Whose word makes people move, kind of thing.
Correct.
Right? Same thing in the state capitol building. I don't know, but you would.
Yeah, 100%. That's the case. It's really, like I said, very similar to how things operate in the streets and how things operate at the Capitol. And in terms of the power structure, definitely being able to know who can get stuff done and who's more just going to run their mouth and be about the clout more than the actual progression of their community or an idea or an agenda. And like I said, that's how you develop your kind of group of folks that you try to work with, that can get job done. See, the point I think I need to stress the most is that I'm one of 51 representatives, and we all have our own community interests. And so sometimes the community interest doesn't align with certain people's politics. And so you have to figure out ways to deal with certain situations in a cordial way to be able to, still be who you want to be, vote how you want to vote, say what you want to say, but do it in a way that's respectful and comes from Aloha, not a place that I'm trying to get you or I'm trying to ruin your career. It's more so, hey, I know that's your position. This is my position. Is there a compromise that we can make? Is there a way forward that both of us can still see eye to eye or not tear each other down? And that's what has given me the most success in the legislature is coming with that aloha that I think all of us need to.
That aloha, based on what you just said, it's kind of the first time I'm thinking about it. But like your ability, then aloha could be one of many definitions of aloha. Could be the ability to separate the self from the group, because you represent a group, but you're also an individual. You're also Cedric, but you're also state representative of District 45. So that's whatever, 25,000 residents or something you said, right? So there's one and there's 25,000, right? And now you can, maybe one definition of aloha is then like, this is how I think, this is who I am, but I represent 25,000 people over there, and I'm sitting across the table from someone else who's one person but represents 25,000 people behind them. And so we got to recognize that. And me talking to you as representatives, having that tact, that ability to just, the cordial nature, or being able to turn on that switch and then saying, okay, I know what you're saying to me right now is not necessarily individual to individual. We're representative to representative. Mm-hmm. And then being able to play like that. I think because if we take it out of state capital and put it back on the streets, you know what I mean? And we say that same dynamic, it's like, oh yeah, I grew up with a lot of people on the streets, right? Who were able to like, wait a minute, I know this person is maybe just getting nuts, but it's not because it's me. It's because of a group that they represent and or a group that I represent, you know what I mean? And so the first reaction is to match that energy, right?
Yep.
Like what? Okay, what? Like that energy, it's easy to match individually, but then be like, oh wait, it's not really about me and you. There's a bigger picture here.
Yep.
Let's unpack that. And that, I feel like that takes time, number one. It doesn't just happen like that, because we're talking about, in this example, there's 50,000 people, 50,002 people in this example, right? It's not going to happen like that. And to have that kind of patience, I think patience is part of Aloha too, right? Because we're not the same person, and we're representing people on a different side of islands with a different set of problems that are specific to them. So like being able to jump, or I would say there's like a switch almost that maybe you've developed, and maybe you'll know more than me, but maybe it's actually mandatory and necessary to be a representative, to be a politician. Because at the end of the day, like how do the streets vote, right? It's very clear for someone like yourself or someone in the state capitol. It's very clear how that voting process goes. But like there's a voting process in the streets as well. And like I think the people who know how to do this the best, the communicators with empathy to know like, hey, we can separate the individual from the group. We can separate the pain, right? And the emotion from the source and the solution.
Correct.
So, I mean, that's crazy because how old are you?
I just turned 30 in June.
You're 30.
Yeah. Got elected at 23.
Which you said was like the
second youngest ever to be elected to the state legislature. And the first was Tulsi Gabbard. She got elected at 21. So, I mean, her dad was the senator at the time, so I know that helped a little bit. But she was doing a lot of work at that time and really representing. But same for me. I felt the same way. And I actually, when 2014 came around, that was my goal, was to become the youngest elected.
Because you were, what, 20 at that
20
time?
at the time. Yeah. So
Oh.
I was trying for that. And that was part of my mission. But I'm fine at being second best, because when you're when you're the first best, that's where everybody comes for you.
But still, what you said, state legislator. So when she was 21, what?
She state rep. Yep, same thing as me. Yeah,
But not
she
45.
represented Kapolei, I believe.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, at the time. Yeah.
My district then.
Yep,
Okay. So you're young in this game.
for sure.
When you're in these rooms, what, you the youngest person there?
Generally, when I first got elected, definitely I was the youngest. I think the median age at the time was 60. So I'm 23 and
0.
yeah, 60. So everybody is 40 plus years older than me. And so navigating that whole room was also interesting. It was a challenge that I welcomed, because I think it was about challenging old ideas too, about being able to go in that room and say, oh, I know that's your perspective, but have we thought about including technology in our solutions? Have we thought about the innovations that we can make to streamline processes that make the lives of our people easier? Like, for example, one of the things that took a while to get done, which we passed, I believe it was this year, was a bill that allows people to apply for their licenses online. Before, you always had to go to the DMV,
Wait in line.
and wait in line,
Thank
and
you.
just have to deal with all of that. And I lost my ID and had to go through that process that everybody has to go through. And I was like, wait, I have to keep checking to see if there's an opening, because the next booking is like 3 months out for your appointment, because it's on the Aloha queue, and it's an online thing. So
Unless you go to a different office somewhere else, right?
Yeah, for sure. On the other side of the island, potentially, because Kapolei, Waianae, they're always filled up to the brim. So that was just kind of some of the things that I was coming with, was that perspective of doing things differently, doing things that matter to people, doing the little things. And I think that is what has maybe lost. And when I got in, people were a little disconnected from the actual community. Actually, for me, I play basketball a lot, so I'm at the park, I'm hanging out with people in the community, and just being able to bounce ideas, and they're coming with all these different perspectives as well, which helps me open my eyes and mind to different things that we should be thinking about or trying to implement. So that was the cool part about being the youngest person, was trying to introduce all of these different new things or old things that didn't work because they didn't do it the right way, potentially. So I had a lot of stuff that I ended up getting passed in my first year, which is unusual, because they tell you, as your first year elected official, you don't expect to pass anything, don't expect to do anything spectacular. But I didn't come with that mindset. I came with the mana of Waianae to the state capitol, and I came out firing on all cylinders.
You get the C right, you get the W on your dashboard.
You already know, man. You already know. Gotta keep that representation up.
So wait, I did want to ask this question about, you could consider me on the political spectrum, right? I'm probably average in that I'm not going to be writing breathtaking, remarkable papers about policies and ways to fix problem X, Y, Z. But I'm also not just completely either jaded or I hate it so much, hate the establishment, F the government kind. You know what I mean? I guess you put me somewhere in the middle, but explain to me how you, besides the part where you mentioned earlier about improving quality of life. To me, that's one measure. Improving quality of life is a measure of your success as an elected official, okay? But when you say pass, explain what that means to kind of the average person. What do you mean passing a bill?
Okay.
What process did you have to go through to pass it? Because it sounds like the way you say it, and it is a triumph for you in your first year, young guy, passed a bill.
Correct.
Explain to me passing a bill. What is that process?
So every legislator, I'll talk about the state house. Every legislator gets allotted about 20 bills that you can introduce every year. And out of the 20 bills, generally none of them pass. because you're changing state law, it's a big deal. It's rewriting the rules, and that takes a lot of support because people are currently operating on those rules that you're trying to change. And so for you to change those rules, you're changing the way people operate. And that's always a hard part. So working with the administration, so forth, whatnot. But the process of the bill, so I introduce a bill. I'll use this example. My first year, I passed the Ohana Zone bill. The Ohana Zone bill is to address houselessness in our communities by establishing places that we can build these micro units, these modular homes, and basically put people into homes and wrap around the services to help them deal with, mental health issues, substance abuse, also getting a job, getting all of their legal documents, all of those things that may seem easy to us, but becomes a difficult situation when you have no money, when you have no knowledge of how the process works,
No address.
no address, exactly, all these different. So having that would be really great. Twinkle Borges, Auntie Twinkle, I call her, Puhonua o Waianae. This bill was to help them transition from Waianae Boat Harbor to Waianae Valley and get the support of the state to be able to do that, because the state at that time was trying to do an enforcement of 300 people at Waianae Boat Harbor, and I opposed it. I was the Waianae Neighborhood Board chair at the time, and I said that we can't do this because we don't have a plan in place. If we have a plan, that's different. If we're just gonna do it out of the sake of we don't want them on the land and let's just get them out of there immediately, then you're just gonna compound the issue, right? Right now, there's a village of people that service providers can go out there, contact them consistently, and have outreach. And you take that away, and now they're in finding needles in haystacks, right? And that was my perspective at the time. And so when I got elected, because I was the neighborhood board chair in 2015, 2016, and so I got elected 2016. That was the first thing I wanted to do, address this issue. And so that was Ohana's own bill. A lot of opposition from the general people at the legislature and even in the community. People didn't support the concept of having these modular units where you build these little communities that allow for people to move off the beaches, which predominantly are Native Hawaiian community members, right? That's why I call them houseless, because Hawaii is always going to be their home. But they don't have a place to stay and stabilize themselves, which was why I felt so strongly about Hana Zone. Shout out to Josh Green, because Governor Josh Green at the time was in the Senate, and he was one of those guys that I needed support, knowing who has power, right? So I believe he was the health chair at the time. Anyways, I needed his support to get this bill passed. Worked with him closely. We ended up fixing some of the details to make it palatable for some of the other representatives or senators that had issues with the bill. That bill goes to a few committees. It gets through the House, for example, because it's a House bill. It goes to the Senate, and the Senate does the same thing the House does, which is hear it in the different committees. Once that happens, it goes to the full floor, which is the whole Senate, and they vote it out. It comes back to the House. House needs to do final drafts on everything, make sure that the bill is good. Usually, it goes to conference. Conference is a different type of committee, which basically gets the last say on the bill. So when all this process of going through a few committees on the House side, passing the full House, then going to the Senate, doing a few committees there, passing the full Senate, coming back to the House, goes through the conference committee. Conference committee says it's all good. We pass it out. It passes the final House vote, and then it goes up to the governor's desk for signature. So like I said, you have to work on the committee chairs to make sure that this bill gets heard in their committee. And not only does it get heard, that it gets passed, because they can kill the bill and just say, that's not a good idea, dead the bill, and now all your dreams are crushed, right? So they ended up, for me, having my community of Waianae at my back, and going down and sharing the realities that many of people who are making these decisions may not have the insight to know what will work and what will not work. And then at the same time, this was a community-driven solution. So not only was it not just coming from me, it was coming from an entire community that was trying to get something done on behalf of the houseless. And that for me, having a home, I know how privileged I am given the cost of living issues, given economics around Hawaii, and just all of the different things that factor into somebody's ability to be successful here. And so coming from that and also coming from the streets, I knew that it ain't easy living in a tent either, right? You got to get a generator. You got to prepare for these storms that could come hit your tent, debris, all of this kind of stuff. So I don't, I want to say look down on them. That's important perspective to make sure you have when dealing with this issue. These are community. This is residents, and we got to treat them like that. And that's where the Aloha comes in. Aloha spirit, right? Always living in that has carried me to where I am and has driven a lot of my decision making when it comes to laws and introducing bills and getting funding for my community.
So is introducing bills the most effect that you could have?
Yeah, I think that's the most concrete thing I can do in my position, because everybody has their role to play. I think that's also important to establish as well. So for me, in my position as state representative, my job is to secure funds in the state budget, because that's what our job in our description requires us to do, and then pass, repeal, or change laws for the betterment of the community at large. And that's my two things that I do. I don't do enforcement. So a lot of people get me confused. Like, they think I'm a law enforcement officer for some reason. I have no badge. I do support our Second Amendment rights. So, I do have carry card. But what that comes down to is having working relationships with the administration. So the governor administration or the mayor's administration deals with the day-to-day operations. They're the CEO, right? We're more like the board. And so the CEO is responsible to get the job done. We set the budget, we set the rules. Their job is to execute and get it done. And that's where we end up falling victim a lot of times, is we get things done at the legislature level or legislative level if you're on the city council side too. But then if the administration doesn't execute, then we're at square one again.
And then people pointing the finger at you.
And people point, I thought you said you fixed this, Cedric. What happened? And then you're just like, oh, I have to work with the actual administration, whether it's the Department of Transportation to deal with Farrington Highway, whether it's the Department of Education to deal with our local schools, or if it's the city and the mayor's office to deal with all of our parks and our beaches across the coast. The only state park is Keawaula or Kaena State Park, and we know where that is at the end of the road. So that's the only state park. Everywhere else is city. So every other park across this whole coast is all city parks, and they deal with their own city politics and their own budget and their own laws that they have to do. So the city and the state oversees the city, and it's in a sense where the city is below the state level, which they deal with the day-to-day stuff like trash pickups and side roads and all that other stuff.
See,
the state does.
Thank you for laying that whole thing out. Like that last 5-10 minutes, I feel should have been part of my. It probably was, but I was probably skipping. I don't know. Like I feel like it should have been part. It's
social studies, yeah.
You know what I mean? Social studies, but I hope, I really, really hope, father of 2 daughters, and that perspective changes your whole mind thinking, your actions, and everything. So I'm thinking of education, public education. I'm a product of the public education school system in Hawaii, right? Yeah. And so when I think about my daughters being a product of the school system in Hawaii, I think about these things, and I can't explain what you just explained, right? I can't do it. I would, look for I'm pretty good at YouTubing. You know what I'm saying? I think we're all pretty good at YouTubing and using the resources and tools available to anybody today, given we have internet and electricity, all these things. But what you just kind of laid out, I feel most people just either they don't know or they try to, they make an attempt, but then they tap out because it's like looking at a plate of spaghetti. Everything's connected, but I don't know what's connected, like who does what. Like, I don't know like how you, I'm pointing the finger at you because you talked to me about this goal, this promise, and it didn't happen. So I'm looking at you again, but they don't see that you are like one of those noodles on the plate
or the cogs inside the machine.
Yeah. And then to understand, it's like if you're not a car person, you're like, my car's making a sound. That doesn't give me anything if I'm the mechanic, right? Like, give me more. And so like the system behind politics here, city, state, federal, like national, like it's very daunting, I think, for a 5-year-old, 6, 7-year-old, third grade, whatever the case be, even adults. Like it's hard for adults to really comprehend how to make the change. We just kind of lump all politicians together in the same. It doesn't matter city, state. I don't care. Yep. Park, is it city? I don't even know there's a difference between city and state parks. Like there's a lot of, I would say, maybe even unfair on your side of like just attributing everything to you.
Correct.
Right? Everything, anything to do with politics. And I think we use it in English language. I'm sensitive to these kind of things because like I learned Japanese as an adult. And so I taught English in elementary schools in Japan for 5 years.
Okay.
So like learning how to teach a language that I didn't even think about learning myself is just natural. This is first language problems, right? You don't even think about what the words you use. And today, it has a little different meaning in today's landscape, but the word they is a word, like let's put that on the side, right? How it's used currently right now is 2023, right? Mm-hmm. I think it's almost like it's like the word good or bad. Like it doesn't give me anything. So when you say like, they didn't fix the street, that doesn't give me anything, right? They told me that we're gonna be able to do, they told me that these parks would be clean. They told me, it's like they, it's just this offloading to this nebulous entity, and then Cedric shows up and now you're they.
Yeah.
Right? I think it's more human nature than, let's say, Waianae, Hawaii, politic kind of things. I think there's a little more human nature to it than that. But thank you for kind of building that scaffolding to think about problems. And now I also see you more as like when you were laying out how you passed the bill, the Ohana Zones bill. I'm like, while you're saying it, I'm just trying to like, I'm a visual guy, so I'm just thinking like you are like in front of Auntie Twinkle, for example. And you are the face and voice that a lot of these community members associate with this goal. But then that's over there in the field. But then when you're in the office or in the Capitol, again, you're face to face with these people. And now you're representing those 25, or I keep saying 25,000. I hope I'm right. 25,000 people, right? Mm-hmm. And so you are this back and forth. You're the,
middleman.
And that's the work.
Yep.
And your job then, like you said, was what? Get funding and then pass or change laws, change rules. Yep. And now I'm just like, my image is just you going back and forth. Yes. Back and forth, handling this person's emotions, handling this person's something happened and blah, blah, blah. And then you have to, I think communication's got to be so like stressful. You're almost like a translator.
Yeah.
In some way, to me.
Man, you're so intuitive. You are reading this correctly, and I have to agree with everything you're saying. It's exactly that.
It's taxing on me to translate when I'm like in Japan and I got friends who don't speak or speak a couple like words of Japanese, and then I get tired.
Yeah.
Like mentally, my brain, I just want to like, it feels like I ran 3 miles sometimes, and all we just had dinner, but there's just this group and that group, and I'm in between, and I'm like trying to, it's tiring. So thank you for your work, bro.
No, I think that's 100% true what you're saying. It's taxing, and it's a sacrifice. Honestly, I feel like this is my way of serving. I'm not trying to be a career politician. I got involved by just being involved. I think that's the key. I was just involved in the community, and by being involved in the community, it drew me to all these different pockets of people, power, and places. And I think that with all of the relationships and experiences that I've had on the Waianae Coast, it all brought me to this one point. And even with my mom passing, all of that has played a role in developing me to who I am. And I think about that all the time. Like, wow, imagine if my mom didn't pass. Imagine if my dad didn't pass. How different my life could have been or would have been. But at the end of the day, I feel like I'm here for a purpose. God's using me as a vessel to do good work. And that's what I live for, honestly, is to really just be able to create the change that I wish I had when I was growing up. Just like for you, there was a lot of things that could have been done better for your generation, right? And that you wish you had, that a lot of these kids, for example, early college, right? Having your AA when graduating with your high school diploma. Imagine that, how ahead of life that can put you, and doing a 2-year BA, right? Instead of doing a full 4 years. Those kind of stuff is what I think about, of how you can pay it forward for the next generations. It's like, how do I?
So speaking of which, what are you doing with Waianae High School?
So Waianae High School, there's really exciting stuff going on right now. There's first some equality that's happening on the Waianae High School campus. We're building a girls' athletic room so that they can have their own space, separated from the boys, and have their own opportunity to grow themselves and become the best they can be in the realm of athletics. That's huge. The second thing that's coming down the pipe is November this year. Most likely, the groundbreaking for the Waianae High School football field will begin. That's some exciting stuff. It's also one of the first things that I did when I got elected. We was try to get us a new road and try to get Waianae High School field fixed finally. I spoke with Larry Ginoza personally on one-on-one, and he was like, "You better get this done before I die." I was like, "Oh my God, that's a real responsibility to put on a young guy like me, 23, first year in the legislature, trying to make these big moves happen." But it was, again, taking that mana, have that conversation with Larry Ginoza, one of the winningest coaches out there for our Waianae Coast community, and him telling me, "You need to get this done, boy, and do it for me and do it for the community." And so, yes, I took on that opportunity to try to champion that issue. 2017, I believe we secured about $2 million, and inflation, all of the different processes with trying to develop a new field on coral bed too. That's a lot more than the 2 million that I secured. So over the years, I ended up securing 6.5 million to do a all turf, all weather track and field for Waianae High School, and the completion date, I believe, is around May of next year. So we'll have the most beautiful field and landscape that you can imagine for a Waianae High School football game, or any high school football game, and even the college games potentially. We have such a beautiful backdrop, sunsets, and
Bro, a lot of people don't realize how beautiful that field. Even though I'm referencing like our games, Waianae field, like, so, OIA West, Campbell, Waianae.
right.
I don't even know. It's still called OIA West.
Yeah.
Okay.
No. There's all kind of stuff now,
I'm a
man.
dinosaur now. I was
think
talking
there's
to my friend
open
about
division,
all these
all kind of
leagues
stuff.
that I grew up in, and it was like, what? I'm like, okay, never mind. Anyway, but that field is like right by the ocean, and it's one of those, like, I was talking to my wife about it. Like, that might be the nicest high school field in Hawaii, in that it's like literally right on the ocean, or like right close. Like, I remember playing soccer and being like, if you kick it out of bounds, or like, eat up time on the clock, you might, if you kick it far enough, like, it might be in the water.
Yeah, seriously.
And it's, the sunset, west side is best side for that. So you put those two things together. I'm like, man, that's a nice it's a nice location, and now you're gonna make the actual structure like nice. That's gonna be cherry.
So funny story. One of my biggest pet peeves about the Waianae High School football field was that ring of red dirt. You familiar with the red? Yeah. So like, you know, as a Waianae boy, you always trying to be fresh, right? You coming out, always looking good. All white Nikes, all white Air Forces. You could not wear Air Forces to the Waianae High School. You learned your lesson the first time you wore it.
You think you're gonna get them this time, huh? You think you can keep them smooth this time? You got the spray bottle thing. You think, oh man, no, impossible.
It's impossible, and you know, it's also like for running track on that field. Like I had to run track all the time during my high school years there, and you would just be blowing up red dirt in your face, and you're trying to run a mile with red dirt blowing all in your face. It was not fun. So those experiences have kept with me till I got here and I could do something to change it, right? That's crazy. Like how you're able to take those lived experiences and try to turn it into some positive things for the next generation, right? So the next generation of Waianae boys coming out, they're gonna be able to wear them all white Nikes, you know.
Now we can see choke clean white soles and Waianae crossing the street right there. Just well, you know, like Campbell just got a new field.
Correct.
Do you know anything about that?
Yeah.
Like, how did that go down? Was that 6.5 million? Like,
I don't exactly remember. I know we got the quotes and stuff for that field just to compare it to Waianae, but I can't recall off the top of my head. Yeah, of course, it all comes down to, you know, representation. The other thing is Campbell is one of the biggest schools in the state, so if not the biggest. And so the needs are amplified, right? You have 3,000 parents potentially out there advocating, talking to their people, knowing that they deserve something better than what they had. And so that's one of the processes that I encourage our community members to get involved in, is like, you know, the garage conversations we have with one another about so-and-so and, you know, politics, blah, 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 blah. That doesn't reach the decision makers. At the end of the day, great conversation, but who did you actually tell to make a change about it, right? If we just talking amongst me and you and there's nobody to help amplify the voices of that conversation, then it just falls on deaf ears, right? And nothing changes. But it's until we have one, it's so powerful how one advocate can change the game in terms of them being able to push issues forward. You know, Ed Warner is one of those guys that I think of, Kalana's father, who was unfortunately hit on Farrington Highway in Nanakuli, passed away. I believe that was 2016. And, you know, he ended up using his son's loss as a lesson and as a way to make things better for the next person. So he came to the legislature to advocate for tougher laws on people who kill people while driving drunk. And with years of advocating, he ended up passing a bill that was named Kalana's bill. And that's like the process that community members who just have that fire and desire to create change, that's the stuff that they can do. And for me as a legislator, one of the things that I want to do and continue to do is to empower community, right? Because I'm only one person, and taking on the brunt of all the issues is a difficult task for anybody. But what makes it easier is that people who can see the vision and have a idea that they really are passionate and strongly supporting, they go out there and start doing the legwork. And that legwork eventually turns to action, and that action then turns to change. And that's the reality that I think a lot of people overlook.
So basically,
their power.
Don't let the conversation end in the garage.
Correct.
At the field when you're watching your kids play a game, in your text, or even like I saw this one sign. I was like, if you have a problem, tell a human, not your followers.
Yeah.
Which is today real relevant, right? Like it's okay. Everybody has a megaphone in the form of accounts, right? But at the end of the day, it's better to talk to Cedric or talk to your representative and actually have your voice heard by the person who is by law, right, able to affect or make that change or get that ball rolling. So like how accessible then are state representatives like yourself?
Very accessible. You know, one of the biggest things I tell people is just to call my office. If you don't talk to me, you'll talk to my staff. My staff can easily schedule a one-on-one meeting, and we can talk, you know, about the issues, formulate a plan to address the issues, and then put the plan in action and work side by side to get things done. I do that often. I encourage more people to do that. Generally, I have a calendar link where you can look at my calendar, schedule a slot that you want, and then it automatically uploads to my calendar on my phone. I can see, okay, I got a Zoom meeting with so-and-so, and I generally ask what the issue is so that we can do our research and go, and because that's one of the biggest challenges, I think, is like knowing everything, right? It's like, even for me, I have to go do research on certain aspects of certain things that need to get addressed. And that takes time. But for the most part, we're always looking at ways that we can get the actions done in a quick manner. I think too many people are waiting too long for action to get done on stuff. But that goes to, again, the process, right? Because like, it's a government, it's slow, and it's kind of made that way by design because, for example, having the opposite, right? Having too many laws changing at too quickly of a turnaround, sometimes you're not even able to implement laws, right? By the time we're changing law already. So we have to be mindful that we need to try to understand how the process works and then work within that process. And again, if process needs to be changed, that's something we can talk about. It's not set in stone.
But where do you draw the line? Like, hey, my neighbor's dog too loud. Like, hey, don't come at me with that. You know what I mean? Like, where, because you can't listen. If 25,000 people hit up your calendar right now, is there some kind of process then? Like, where you say, hey, you know what, this is not something that your state representatives can help you with, but this is.
Yeah, so generally I can tell on the face of an issue who it would fall under in terms of jurisdiction. So you talk about something about the military. I already know it's federal government. That's not me. It'd be our congressional delegation, like Rep. Joe Takuda or Rep. Ed Case or Brian Schatz, Senator Brian Schatz, and Senator Hirono. So those are 4 congressional delegation folks that represent us in D.C. But because if the issue is dealing with military, those are the appropriate people to talk to. But if they're a constituent, what I like to do is be the middleman. So I will take their concerns. I will draft the email or make a call to the federal office, let them know I have a constituent with a federal issue and that needs help from the federal offices. And that helps move the conversation quicker because it's coming from a state representative, right? Rather than a constituent just has an issue.
Is a constituent just a citizen? Like
what? A constituent is a resident that you represent. So it's basically your bosses.
So you get 25,000 bosses.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I like to think of it as.
You thought you had on a hard job.
But, you know, it's an interesting dynamic because, you know, you won't always please everybody, right? Like, people will be mad at me for making the decision that I think is the best decision on behalf of the majority of residents. Of course, there's going to be times where it's going to rub people the wrong way or impacts a community of folks that may not be involved in that situation. But what I try to do is rely back on just kind of my instincts, right? You have to, that's what I feel is my strength too, is just kind of like knowing our community, right? Knowing the people, knowing how we would react to certain things.
Because you're from that community.
Yeah.
So there's that trust in like, well, you know,
Yeah.
you drive the same road that I do. You see the same thing. But speaking of that, like, not like this podcast is like world famous or anything, but to people who don't know Waianae, how would you give me your, this is Waianae.
So Waianae is the most beautiful place in the world. It's a lot of times overlooked. I think that's a part of our defense mechanisms is we also cherish what we have, and we don't want people to exploit us and exploit our community. I think that's where the stigma of Waianae comes in, where it's like, oh, that's a rough community. Oh, you better watch your back. Oh, I think that's by design, because it makes those people who may have bad intentions, or it makes them weary of entering the community with a certain type of energy, right? And I've always told people our community members are the most friendly people you'll ever meet if you come with aloha, if you come with respect, if you treat others the way you want to be treated. When all of those things are crossed off in the opposite direction, that is when you'll run into trouble. And, that's the beauty of Waianae too. I like that about our community because, sometimes people just need to get checked and corrected. And that's kind of my attitude too, at the legislature is like, we have to be real with each other, right? And be real with the circumstances that are out there. And that we can't take what we do for granted. And like for me, I serve as if this might be my last election, right? I serve like there ain't no future of me being in office to create the changes that I want to see. I don't just say, oh, I'll just do that next year, or because I may not be here next year, and that's like always, and that goes to the fact of losing both your parents unexpectedly at a young age, right? It's like, okay, you move differently. You don't think of things as permanent, or you don't think of things as guaranteed, because nothing in life is guaranteed except death and taxes. But that's really what has moved me in the direction that I am moving now, is like break down the doors, try to do things differently, push the envelope, don't be scared. What they say, if you're scared, go to church, which we all do too. I'm a Christian faith, but like that's the energy you got to come with, because like tomorrow's never promised, and the people that's living in these circumstances now, it's real. It's now. It's not push it down the road, and you can wait another 3 months. None of that stuff. And when you treat community issues with that sense of urgency, that shows you care. That shows the people that are complaining to you that they matter. And that's the kind of leader I like to think I am, and try to operate from that space.
What kind of natural resources are in Waianae? I think because I heard talk, and maybe but I'm sure you know more than me, but like a solar farm going up in there. So obviously, well, that's for a lot of Hawaii is solar. But what other kind of natural resources does Waianae offer?
So, of course, our beaches. That's a natural resource to us. We do have a lot of lo'i patches, mainly Waianae Valley area. What else do we have? We have a lot of agriculture, actually, in our community. So, Waianae used to be the bread basket for Oahu. Due to many factors, including water diversion, things of that nature, and just a change in the industry, right? Heavy sugar plantation community changed over, and there's dairies, piggeries, egg farms, all of these different things that are accessible to our community members, or our community members are actually doing the work to do it. One of the biggest things that I like is Kahumana Farms. Kahumana Farms is a nonprofit, really doing a lot of different work in the community, whether it's through housing our houseless community, growing these organic fruits and veggies, having the economic driver of having a diner, and they have these CFA boxes where you order basically whatever they're growing for that week.
We get those.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
you
yeah.
know what I'm
Yeah,
talking
yeah,
about.
yeah.
So those are like really cool things that are community driven in our community, accessible to our community.
I know there's also Mao farms.
Mao Farms, shout out to Mao
Yeah.
Farms. Work with them very closely. Gary and Auntie Kukui, those guys are revolutionaries. I think they have paved the way to tie in agriculture to economics to social justice and social good to our community of Waianae, and in a sustainable way. They have over 200 acres that they just acquired in Nanakuli at Lulule Naval Road. They are growing a bunch of fruits, veggies, and trying to create the workforce that our community need to be more self-sufficient. As the chair of agriculture, for example, and food systems, we are working to double our food productions, right? And how do we become less reliant on the ships and more reliant on ourselves? And that's all these questions that I'm trying to answer as the chairman of the Agriculture and Food System Committee.
So
But
you're that too then.
yes, I'm currently that. I formerly served as the chairman of Culture, Arts, and International Affairs, which was really fun committee to work on and develop relationships with folks who are doing great work in the art space and culture space in Hawaii.
Shout out to Waianae's media.
Sea Rider Productions.
Yeah, Sea Rider,
Yes.
because I know they've some big hitters in the field, right?
Correct.
And so shout out. And then but now you're state rep and this as well as what you're saying.
Yeah, so as a state representative, there's committees that you get to serve on. So transportation committee, housing committee, finance committee, all these different types of committees, you get to serve on them. Or if you have seniority, you get to become the chairman of the board or the committee. So you're the head, and then you have committee members, which make up of other representatives from other districts. But you're the lead on all of the agriculture stuff, all the food system stuff, and then formerly culture, arts, and international affairs.
And now you're the chairman of the agriculture.
Yes.
So that to me is a real like personal one, because one, I like fresh vegetables. Like, I mean, maybe you could attribute that to my 8 years in Japan. Like, I lived in the country, and so I saw all these fields, right? And like I was like, that makes sense to have it right outside, then you eat it, right? And so coming back home to Hawaii, when we moved back, I was like, oh, it's actually not that easy to just, there's the food, I'm gonna eat it. And it's just easier to go to Costco, right? It's like a lot of people do.
Yep.
But then I think with 2020, it kind of like shoved it in our face, like, hey, how resilient are you? Not much at all, actually.
Yep.
And so I started fishing a lot too when I came back to Hawaii, West Side, right? And so that just makes you so much more aware of natural resources. And it makes you so much more aware of how rich in natural resources of a place this side of the island, but Hawaii in general is as well, and how sustainability was for people 500 years ago, 600 years ago, whatever, right? Like, people have been using these lands in very sustainable ways that could produce enough, maybe even surplus. Now it's very different. There's a lot more people on this island. I know there's a lot more people with economic interests who have power in the mix. So there's a lot more different, it's a different landscape today, I get it, but the land is still there, the ocean is still there, the sky is still there. And I think about ways to incorporate that kind of food resilience in the everyday person's life, especially here on the West Side, right?
Yeah.
Which is why, we get those CSA boxes too. And
Right.
like, it's like just one way to do it, visiting the farm. I know like Uncle Gigi.
Yeah.
Like,
Waianae.
yeah. So like we take the kids there or some, you know what I mean? Like, what else options do we have? I would love it if I didn't have to go all the way across the island to Heia to go to like a fish pond. But, when I look at even the name Waianae, mullet, right? Like, there's there's a lot more opportunity for this food resilience than I think is put out there in like not the open, but like it feels like you have to search for it. And I would like it more accessible and like normal to have these things like farms, fisheries, or even like I'm sure someone's doing it and I just don't know, but like a you know how there's paddle crews? Is there a fishing crew? You know what I mean? Like, hey, anybody who like learn how to fish? Hey, we're gonna hand pull some Walmart today. You know what I mean? It feels like you gotta search for these things. Oh, maybe I'm talking to the guy who can help right now. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, but that kind of thing that usually is reserved for like a field trip. So a half a day in your third grade, you can experience this. Whereas one of the elementary schools I went to in Japan was freaking, bro, this was so awesome. Like first and second grade at this school would go to the mouth of the river. So there's a big river and then Japan's largest lake, Lake Shiga, are right next to it, right? And so our place is called Arogawa, is the name of a river that goes from the mountain to this lake. And it's actually very much, it reminds me of West Side. Because you look on one side and there's just water. And you look at the other side, there's mountains. And there's one road that just goes in between the mountains and the ocean, yeah? Or the mountains and the water. And so this school, the first and second graders, your field trips would be to the last third of the river, like the mouth. Third and fourth graders, their field trips would be to the middle third of the river. Fifth and sixth graders, their field trips would be to like the source up in the mountains. So ideally, at the end of a 6 year, if you went to Arogawa Elementary School for all 6 years, you would have learned about the entire ecosystem of this river and how it feeds into the nation's largest lake, which is also a water source for all the prefectures that it runs out of, right? Like all the water goes down. And so I was like, man, that is just a beautiful concept that I wish I had at Makakilo Elementary. You know what I mean? But then I'm looking around like there's no river that makes it easy like that. But there's a version of it. Whether it's like, it took me all the way to high school till we went to Honolulu like reserve. Up, it was more like we entered like from Kunia side. I remember we was going like Kunia Golf Course or whatever it's called today. Like we went that side, up the mountains up there. But that was me in ninth grade. You know what I mean? I feel like I would have been way more stoked and way more interested earlier on as a young child going up there. And then similar to this Arogawa Elementary School that I'm talking about, like if every year I was connected to this place that I'm growing up in. And then add on top of that, the socioeconomic side of it, because this river is home to a lot of the bamboo that is some like majority % of all, you know, those fans, like Japanese fans that you like spread out and do like this?
Yeah.
The ones that are made with bamboo spines. This river supplies the majority of those spines for making these fans. So there's an economical part, right? Like, but it's coming from the river that I'm growing up on. I'm learning about the dragonflies and the larvae and how they, you know, the season that they come out. I'm learning about how we divert this water to the rice fields. I'm learning about in the mountain. And like, for me, I was happy that I could experience that as an English teacher, right? I'm an English teacher in this setting. But all my students, when they're outside of the English class, like I'm interested in what they're learning too. And when I found out about that, I was like, man, that's so amazing. How can I implement that in some way, shape, or form personally like, with my daughters? So I take them fishing. I take them in the mountains. Like, I want to implement that, but that's a personal level. I would love to see that just at elementary school though, you know? So when I hear you talking about these farms and, you know, visiting these farms with my children now, like it's pieces of it. But I would like to see it implemented in a more way that's just not special. Field trip day is just normal.
Yeah.
So I'm figuring it out, you know, as a father, but a community member too. Like, how can we just get way more connected to this place, West Side, Oahu, in a way that, one, just, I feel like as an adult, it's harder, but as a child, it's easier to just be interested in anything outside. Just go outside.
Yeah.
You'll pick something up. You'll ask questions. Like, it's easier for young kids. So, like, how can we just have that interest-based learning, but experience in the place that you live? And then two, how does it affect like on a world scale or even state, whatever, but like economic wise? So I like that part of it too, where there's a business side that you're learning about how you can, in a very Pono way, obviously, monetize, right? Strengthen, empower the community. So I'm saying this because this is just a personal thing that's been bubbling in my head for years, right? And then moving back home, it's been a lot more like front of mind, especially with these kids. And I don't know yet, right?
Yeah.
We holo every weekend, yeah, but at school, I don't know how deep you can get. I feel like there's a lot of red tape to get through with school.
Yeah, liability
you know
is
what I
the
mean?
biggest
Yeah,
word in the
right.
school vocabulary.
I get it. I get it. But come on, like, bruh, get these kids out. If we break it down in a Hawaii way, it would be the Aupua, right?
Yes.
And just kind of like Arogawa Elementary School. Every year, maybe start in the Lo'i and work your way all the way down to the fish pond. But every year, if you went to Waianae or Makakilo or whatever, you would just know how your environment that you grew up in. It would be fun play, but then you also learn like how you could monetize it, how businesses make money off it.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to unpack there. I'll start off with saying I strongly support charter schools as well as place-based learning curriculum. I think those are the biggest ways that we can start tying the culture of our community to the education of our community members, which are our students in our school systems. One of the schools that I really like that are coming out of the DOE, it's a alternative learning structure. It's called Papa Okaiona, and that is taking kids that may be at risk or may not fit in the traditional learning setting and putting them in that place-based learning setting and watching these kids connect. And I've had experience with watching these kids and learning from them and hearing their perspective on how much more they like this place-based learning than the standardized testing that they got to go through, or just the rut of school too. It's like it's a whole different dynamic. It's teaching them about leadership, teaching them about giving back, community, and that's where I think a lot of the kids will find their space and their place in that. For me, a lot of people don't know this, but I dropped out of high school. I dropped out of high school at the age of 15. I was going to Waianae High. So, that goes right into we talking about place-based learning and exposing these kids to their community, exposing them to the resources of the community, how everything's connected. That's how I feel the next generation of community members, our students, will be able to connect to our educational system. I think there is a huge disconnect between how kids learn today and how we're teaching kids, right? So how kids learn today isn't the most productive way that we're teaching them, right? Yeah, I guess you can say. So for me, my personal story is dropping out of Waianae High School at the age of 15. I completed 10th grade. And, I did decent. I had decent grades. But like I said, I was running around with the wrong crowd, right? Getting involved into that life that I didn't really foresee the future for me being in that lifestyle. And so it's hard living in a community of Waianae when like your friends all want to do certain things, right? Like you got to click, and then that click ends up, wanting to do things that you're not really supportive of. And then, you're stuck in the middle, right? Like I don't want to be here, but I gotta be here because these are my friends, so that was one of the pressures, right, that a lot of our kids also face in our community all the time. It's that peer pressure. It's the, let's do this and be cool, or do it for girls, whatever the case may be. And I needed to get out of that lifestyle. And so I dropped out of school at 15, and I enrolled in Youth Build Honolulu, which is an alternative learning program supported by the federal and city government. And they take you out of these situations and kind of put you with like a teacher that's also like a mentor, somebody that's actually going to care if you come to school, actually keep you accountable to your actions and teach you what it takes to be a leader, because it's not easy. It's, you know, you got to hold yourself to a higher standard. You got to think 10 steps ahead, all of these different components that I don't feel the traditional learning setting that I was at was conducive to that kind of mindset. So when I graduated at 16 from that program, they made an exception for me. I think it was 15 and a half. You had to be 16 to 24 is the program. But I ended up graduating at 16 because it's an 8-month program. And when I left there, I really felt empowered. Like, I don't know, it was just like a transformation for me, because I came in there like with this mindset of, you know, being from Waianae. And when I left there, I came with a mindset of being a leader and standing on your own too, 10 toes down. And bringing that back to the community, that's when I started the nonprofit with my brother. I was like, you know what, we got to make that change. We got to do something. We got to be that change. Because one of the things about this program was that not only taught you about the key life skills you're going to need, balancing your checkbook, knowing your credit, all of these things. I was fortunate that this school was able to instill that into me, because they're coming from a perspective like, this kid's not probably going to go to college. He's probably going to enter the workforce leaving out of here. What does he need to know now before he leaves our school? And they kind of packed you with that.
Oh, nice. What's the name of this program?
Youth Build Honolulu.
And they're still active? They still do it?
Yes. So I'm their poster child.
Oh.
I'm the poster child, a Youth Build graduate, you know, who ends up becoming the state representative for their district. Like I mentioned, I was part of the Hawaii Business Magazine 2015. I was on the cover. Partially because of my adversity and going to Youth Build and how that shaped my life to where it is now of learning. But going back to that school, one of the special things that I sticks with me till this day is that you go to a Windward Community College trade school where you learn basic carpentry, plumbing, electrical skills. You go, after you complete that class, they partnered with our public housing authority. And what we'd do is we'd use those skills we learned to go and fix up a public housing project. So we did Waimaha and Waianae. That was what really connected me to my community. Oh, we're doing a work in here, and then you see all your friends, and then you get to meet the people that move into the place that you guys are repainting and getting ready for them to move in. That's special, and that's really like, as a kid, 16 years old, doing that, you're like, whoa, I just kind of changed their life, right? And that was kind of my perspective at the time. And when I left there, that's what I wanted to continue, that feeling of wow, accomplishment, wow, making an impact and putting my skills to use and knowing that you're not useless, I guess you could say.
It sounds like there was a good bridge between your education and your community.
Correct.
Is what I'm hearing. And that's Youth Honolulu. What?
Youth Build Honolulu.
Youth Build Honolulu.
Yes.
So shout outs to them.
Yeah, so I'm trying to establish that at the state level. So that's something, again, I'm passionate about. I want to create a fund that will help start these youth build projects in different communities. I think this is something every community needs, because it really helps those people that are falling through the cracks, that may not have a good trajectory in life, to kind of correct that, especially if you catch them at a younger age, 16, 17. You know, that was the game changer for me, and that's why I'm trying to pay it forward. I actually met the founder. It's a person from Harlem that founded this youth build program, and then it got placed in Hawaii as one of those branches of youth builds, because it's supported by the feds, as well as the local municipality, which is the city government. And that then allows this to stand up on its own. Now I think it's with Work Hawaii. So they're trying to get people who may have dropped out of school. They need to get into jobs, but they need this graduation first, right? They need to get a diploma. They need a GED. And that's what is kind of filling that gap right now.
So this is all funded by the city and federal government?
Yes.
Okay. And even, is that the same for, I meant to ask you with the 6.5 mil for Waianae, the athletic field, that's coming from federal. That's
From,
federal.
no, that's state dollars.
Oh,
so
okay.
state budget, that's what I directly oversee, and then the city has the city budget, and the feds have the feds budget. So it's basically three different budgets, and so I do deal with directly state. Another exciting project that I wanted to mention is we just secured over $5 million to redo the jetties at Pokai Bay.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Water circulation has been a huge issue. Contamination of that area has been a big issue. Water runoff from the streams have been a big issue, polluting the bay. And what we were trying to do is rebuild something that will increase circulation in the bay, as well as provide platforms for our cultural practitioners that utilize the heiau.
I was gonna say that was on the recent news.
Yeah. So all of that kind of stuff will be incorporated with this new jetty installation. This is going to be done with the Department of Land and Natural Resources. How that process will work is that the money was secured this year, so it'll be available for them starting July 1st of this year. And then what happens is that they start working to do community outreach, because we want this to be a community project, right? I think Pokai Bay is one of the most beloved beaches on our coastline, where you take the kids, where you have family gatherings. I have pictures of me there, 5 years old, with a Pepsi can in my hand. That place is just so much memories with the dock and everything. But for me, that's where, again, my heart for my community always shines through. It's like, I know that Pokai Bay is one of the most important places in our community for many people. Let's invest in that place, make it better for not just our current generation, but the next generations to enjoy with their families. And that's what it's about for me. It's like, how do I make that lasting impact? Because, again, I'm not going to be here forever. So I come with that perspective of how much good can I do in this time that I've been given in this place that I currently serve. And that's the stuff that we're looking at. So exciting news that should be coming down the pipe within this next year. We should start having those community planning meetings, and then start finalizing a plan of action to then submit for bid. And then once that goes out to bid, somebody will take that bid, will contract it out, works begins.
So at these community reach out events or meetings, like what can a constituent expect if they go there?
Open mind, open heart is what I've always told my constituents. That's the kind of representative I am. I serve with that type of mentality. And so come with your ideas. You had some great ideas that you just shared today that we need to talk offline about and how we can implement that. But yeah, that's what we need them to do, is come with ideas, share their mana'o, let us know what they think would be best, because I think no one person has all the answers, and that but as a collective, we can really come to a consensus on something that's a win-win for everybody.
So basically they could show up and have their ideas about this new jetty. What damaged it? Because I know there's those big boulders and stuff missing. Like, what was that?
Well, it's over the years, just, lack of repair, I guess you can say, and investment into that. There was a big issue of jurisdiction. So that was I've been wanting to fix this since I got elected, but we could never get the Army Corps of Engineers to agree, or the Department of Land and Natural Resources to agree that that's their jurisdiction. They're going to take the money and do what needs to be done. So finally, shout out to Senator Mailisha Mabukuro, because she was the lead on this one, where she was able to get all the people in the room and make them commit to saying, I'm going to take this on and give me the money and we'll get it done. And that's what it came down to. And once that happened, then we were able to move forward, because in order to create a budget, the money has to go to somewhere. Right? It can't just be floating in the air. It has to go to a department. It has to go for a specific purpose. And so knocking all of those down was the most important thing to be able to move forward to where we are now.
Is DNLR that state?
Yes, DNLR is state. Correct.
State. So when you have state and federal, sort of, because here's the thing, like in Hawaii at large too,
Mm-hmm.
there is I don't know, the biggest military presence in the Pacific is here, like on this island too, right?
Yeah.
And so I know there's some installations out west,
Correct.
and so there's like this federal presence with a state presence, and then there's also a big amount of your constituents, I'm sure, who don't even recognize the statehood or the connection to this entity that is the United States. And so when you have these like deep level conversations such as like military power and presence, how does someone in your position then sort of, what kind of conversation are you having between the constituents and the people at the state capitol when it comes to these things like ownership, presence, and power?
Yeah. So for me, Makaha boy, through and through, the biggest thing for me is listening to my kupuna. I think that's the guiding principle, because we got to understand we have kupuna that have lived in Makua Valley, right? Who was evicted so that they could then do what they did, which is live training and bombing the heck out of a precious space in our community. Of course, I stand with the no live firing and training anymore. I think it's almost, I know it's been a decade, might be going on two, that there has been no live firing. And that's because people in our community, our kupuna, took the mantle and said, ole, and we're not going to have more of this. You guys already desecrated the Aina enough, and we're not going to stand for that. So since, again, I got elected, every year pretty much I introduced a bill to return Makua back to the state, which the state would then return back to the community for cultural practices and purposes. But again, there's a massive cleanup that needs to take place, that the state shouldn't foot the bill, because we're talking about millions on millions of dollars that are going to be required to clean up all of the ammo that has not even fired. You know, there was a recent situation there where, you know, the landscapers were cutting and they ended up hitting one of those unexploded ordinances and blowing off their leg. That's real. And so, you know, if you're going to give it back to the community, do not give it to us in that condition. And so, you know, there's a lot of liability with that. But it's, the leases come up in 2029 for all of the military installations. And we're hoping that the military doesn't renew its lease with the state for Makua. And then that process can then begin for returning that back to community use. We also have been pressing them to just clean up the unexploded ordinances now. Don't wait till you transition into, if you're not live firing on there, might as well start the process. And if you don't plan on live firing, might as well get going, the ball rolling on this issue. And then with Lulu'ole Naval, you know, that's DHHL land. That's a massive amount of DHHL land to be placing that military installation on. I also think that could be returned one day to the community for community use. Maybe DHHL could build more Hawaiian homestead housing for our Native Hawaiian community. Those are the things that we feel we should be looking at to help our community thrive out on the Waianae Coast. Economic opportunities, housing opportunities, and cultural opportunities.
Especially with like affordable housing, right? Like how do you balance then like having more affordable housing while sort of like, one, the land is limited, right? So the resource of land itself is limited, right? Especially when you get, there's mountains and oceans. So everything in between is where you can actually develop. Right. But a large part of the footprint are these installations, right? And so if you want more affordable housing, how do you get that while preserving the natural resources at ocean, mountains and such, and increasing the housing for people to live?
I think the number one thing that needs to happen before any of that is infrastructure. And I think that's the common denominator of why a lot of people oppose more housing, is because look how bad traffic is now. You're telling me you want to add another 1,000 homes, 10,000 homes, whatever amount of homes that you're trying to build in a community that has one way in, one way out,
Bruh.
and that we already deal with a heck a lot of traffic as is. So I think that's one of the biggest oppositions of why we shouldn't build housing. So having an improved infrastructure plan, such as a secondary access road, which we're currently working on. We're waiting on the city and county of Honolulu to do their job in the paperwork aspect of it, and the agreement that needs to be made with all the different partners. I believe it's city, state, federal, and private landowners that we're working with to try to open up Lulule Naval Road to Pa'akea for daily use. So me and Senator Shimabukuro at the time secured funding in the state budget to redevelop that road, because it's not up to code, I guess you can say, because it's made for emergencies. So upgrading that path to be, I believe it's like 12-foot lanes or something like that. Being able to do that would then allow us to then have a thorough traffic lane to get to Makaha Waianae from Nanakuli and vice versa, with it falling into code. So what would then what's the current plan on that is that the state will upgrade the road to the city and county standards. They'll return that to the city and county, and the city and county would manage that road as a side road. But that's why we're waiting on the city and county to get all of that settled, and then we can then start the process to, like I said, contract out or put it out to bid, and then contract it out, and then start the construction. Those are the three components that we need to take place right now. And if you're watching this, advocate to your city and council as well as our mayor to finish this quickly so that we can start the process on this new road.
What about Kole Kole Pass?
So Kole Kole Pass, we have a MOA with memorandum of agreement with the feds to utilize that for emergency vehicles, emergency responders, and emergency supplies. So that's kind of what that road is. I don't think that road has the capacity and the conditions that it currently is to have thorough traffic through there. I think long term, of course, in the conversations of lease renewal, right? How does that play into maybe gaining access to that road and maybe getting it through the state so the state can upgrade it and make it a part of our infrastructure upgrade?
Because, if you live, for example, I know this whole conversation is very Hawaii, Oahu based too, but if we go to the other side, like if you live Kailua, Kaneohe, right, you get 5 ways in and out, right? You got Likelike H3 Poly, but then you could go up or down around, right? So it's like, okay, the eye test, it looks similar, right? Mountain, ocean, everybody in between. But over here, Farrington Highway is very different. We get, like you said, one way in, one way out. I'm very familiar with that. We all spent hours on this road. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, man, if only we had that kind of option too. Like if you live Kailua, for example, go through the mountain or around it. Of course, kind of point, we're not going to Mokulia from that side. But because there's a state park and all of that. But I get it when you say that infrastructure would be the first part of the plan.
Yes.
Because as it is, there's one way in, one way out. And the other options, maybe there's other constraints on it. So that would be, I think, you'd get everybody's vote if you improve quality of life by saying something like, hey, you're spending 5 weeks less this year on the road. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because so much time of people of your constituents in particular in Makaha who got to go the furthest. Nanakuli maybe not so much. Honokai not as much, right?
Yeah, but you guys couple layers.
Yeah, we but that traffic is no joke.
It's not.
And so real tangible improvement, quality of life would be that of amongst many other things I know. But it's what else, I guess, is on your plate? What can we look forward to with Cedric?
So I just want to wrap up what you were just saying on that and about the infrastructure and what I was talking about in terms of housing and what housing we should support. Because, you know, $1 million homes is not what we need as local residents out on the Waianae Coast. But the low cost housing, you know, rentals, those kind of stuff, rent to own homes, you know, public housing could be the option, or DHL housing is something that we should consider. I don't, I'm not saying we have to 100% support all of those concepts, but those are what we should consider in terms of homes, because eventually we're all not going to be able to have homes out here that are going to be affordable if we don't develop homes that are going to be affordable. So it's like, you know, it's a give and take, because we have to have, you know, more housing inventory besides cracking down on Airbnbs and investment properties and all of this kind of stuff that's happening under the housing bubble that's happening right now. But having that type of housing will only kickstart equity. And a great example of that too is self-help housing, where they allow you to build homes for cheap price, and then you can help your neighbors build their homes, and then at the end of the build, everybody moves into their home and they have like 200,000 in equity because they put in the labor and built the home themselves.
This is already happening?
Yeah. Nanakuli is the next development right behind Helilua. So people can apply for that self-help housing to try to get into housing that is lower cost for them and has a lower, of course, down payment and all of that. So great program. Claudia Shea is the director of that, and she's doing amazing work standing these homes up and getting actually local residents into these homes. A lot of the guys that they just built up at Poka Bay Estates, they are all majority local guys, and I met a lot of the families, and that's beautiful. That's what we need, home ownership for our local residents.
You said cracking down on Airbnbs, because that's a very short-term rental thing in Hawaii. Like, can you unpack that a little bit?
Yeah,
specific to Waianae.
Yeah. So a lot of times, you know, we have beachfront property, right? We live in a coastal community, so the values of these homes are through the roof. And what happens a lot of times is that, you know, these people are buying these properties with the intention to Airbnb it. And a lot of times what happens is that, say, even with Airbnb cracks on these people who are not in these resort zoned areas that allow for Airbnbs. But then there's all these off-brand sites that do not see the regulations that the state and the city put on Airbnbs, and they let things go the way it is, whatever the case may be. So you have a lot of those things happening in our community. I'm going to expose some people, but Moore Street, the place I grew up partially in Makaha, you know, that place used to have a lot of local families in that area. Now you go down that street, majority of them are Airbnbs. You can't, I'm not an investigator, I'm not an enforcer. I can't necessarily go in there and secure, you know, say like this is 100% Airbnb. But reports from all the neighbors that I'm getting is that they're all Airbnbs. You know, they're hosting big parties, they're doing all of these kind of wedding stuff. And, you know, that's where it becomes a sticky situation, because like you're coming into a residential community, you're hosting ragers inside of the residential community, and then now residents, as Waianae is, you come respect, get respect, come with disrespect, you don't get disrespected. And so those guys go check them, right? They're like, hey, what the heck you guys doing? Da, 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 da. And then that creates unsafe situations, right? And so there's a little of that bubbling over right now in terms of people trying to self-regulate. Like, hey, I don't like what you guys are doing here. And yes, we may not be able to necessarily pin this on you right now or catch you because you're doing all of these different steps to stay hidden, right, from the actual regulations that exist. But then again, I see it from another economic standpoint where many local people who are in this industry. That's the way that they're living in Hawaii. Like that's the way that's how they're staying here. So it's like, not to reference another Jay-Z quote, but you can't knock the hustle, right? It's like that's what I personally feel, right? As like somebody that understands the struggle and knows that, you know, every dollar counts, and that you got to get it how you live sometimes. And so people are in that space where it's like I've been approached by some people because I've taken strong stances against Airbnb. So it's public that my position on it, and that they come to me and like, hey, this is how I'm planning to send my kid to college, right? This is how I'm able to live in the house that I'm currently living in. My mortgage gets paid. And so you're like, well, I understand that. And that's why there's legal ways to do it and there's illegal ways to do it. And sometimes the legal ways, just as any process, could be difficult and irritating, right? Frustrating. And you kind of just do your thing. So going back to that, I think that, you know, keeping Airbnbs in resort areas is appropriate, but also we want to make sure that the tourists that are here aren't just being cheap too, right? We want people to stay in the hotel because that's how the hotel, we get the TAT tax, the transit tourism tax that we get from that, and that helps fund the state budget and helps fund projects in our community,
Like the Waianae athletic field.
yeah, like the Waianae Athletic Field, exactly. Well, going back to projects, one of the other cool projects that we're working on right now is at Makaha Elementary School. Between the A and B building, we're building a new 21st century learning center. This was a project I spearheaded on with the former principal, Principal Wade Arakai. He did this, I believe, in Kaneohe, but he was able to turn like this space into a engaging learning center. And again, going back to how do we get these kids to connect, to learn, to be able to appreciate, right, what's being taught. This is one of those ways because we're incorporating technology. It's an outdoor space, so you're not stuck in a classroom just kicking rocks, right? You're able to enjoy the beauty of the landscapes outside. And then what we're hoping to do is have it like a performance center where, for example, during Ohana nights or talent shows, people can use this space to then showcase their talents and be able to be appreciated in what they do. And you know, being in a hot cafeteria isn't the wave no more. You know, it's like we gotta get away from that and try to make it more pleasurable for our students and our people.
So when you say, because hot education to me, that is education. Is you hot, you sweaty, it's hard to focus. I get it. Right towards the tail end of my public education journey here in Hawaii was we started getting like window units.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Oh, those are lifesavers,
We
right?
started, but like not all. Some of the portables still was just wooden jealousy windows. You know what I mean? Like, bruh, it's not the best environment, right? So to hear you making moves to like make the environment better, thank you. That's great. And like, but that kind of leads to another thing where I was thinking about how to use, for example, clean energy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that's everybody talking about. It's the election year, so
Okay,
we're gonna hear more.
I have to declare a conflict, I guess, or we're talking about renewable energy. So during COVID, I thought that I was gonna lose my job and that I wasn't gonna have no money to support myself or my other half. And I was like, man, I gotta find something to do. I gotta find something that's gonna have a positive impact into the community because I kind of feel that's super important to my outside employment. So the legislature, it's a part-time legislature. So January to May is when you're in the legislature, and basically from May to December, you can work another job. So one of my other jobs is marketing advertising, and then I do marketing advertising for a solar company. And so that's kind of my second job. Like everybody else in Hawaii who wants to survive here, you have to get a second job. And so that's my second job, hooking people up with solar for fair rates a lot of times in that industry. And one of the reasons why I got involved in that solar industry, was because we had mainland companies coming here, taking advantage of our residents who are novice in dealing with solar and exploiting them. I can show you quotes that I've given to people, and quotes that they have been given from other companies, and I'm talking $80,000 difference in
Bruh.
how much
For
their
like single
same
family
system. Same. I priced out the same system using the solar company that I'm partnered with, and comparing it to what they got quoted from. I won't want to say some names, but we'll keep it cordial, folks. And it was a $80,000 difference. I could not believe it. I was like, "Whoa, this is predatory, usury at this point." How these guys are operating. So that was kind of my call to action. I was like, okay, this is how I can make some side money and also save my community from getting exploited by these big companies that are out for just profit and not caring about their reputation. Like a lot of these guys, they start businesses here, and once they make a quick buck, they're packing up and they're leaving. So I've had a lot of cases in that realm too, where you're working with somebody who needs solar, and generally my business was more word of mouth, talking to folks who might need it during COVID, especially when everything was uncertain. But these companies come in and then they close up, and then the maintenance for all of these systems, nobody to maintain it. So once something goes down, it was mainly our kupuna that was being exploited, which made me pissed off even more, because they're trusting that these people are there for their best interest, but really they're to rob them of their life savings and give them a crap deal. And so, yeah, just to declare that conflict, I know before we get into that, but go ahead, ask your question.
That's it. No, it was just, I thought, for me, my experience is Eva Beach, Campbell High School, okay? The conversation about getting AC units. One of the opposing voices would be the electricity bill.
Mm-hmm.
So I was, at that time, right, I was thinking, well, bruh, it's so hot here. You telling me we cannot convert this solar? And I don't know if it was like top of mind, like solar energy, clean energy, the labels we use now, right? I said, bruh, it's so hot. Convert that into, you know what I mean? Like plug into the sun, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Why is someplace so abundant in this this resource?
Mm-hmm.
How come we not even converting or capitalizing on that somehow, right? So
Yeah.
to me, it makes sense. Like, we should have AC. We should have like the lowest. We should be selling energy to the grid. You know what I mean? Here in Eva Beach. Towards the end, we finally started getting those like window units sprinkled into the whole facility. But like, is there any of that kind of coming down the pipeline as far as clean energy use? We don't live Kahuku. We don't see the windmills. I think we don't see a wind farm, so it's not like top of mind as much as over here. But we definitely feel the heat. We know there's a strong energy source in the sun.
Yeah.
How are we converting that, if any? Are there any plans for that?
Yeah. So
And
we'll
then for you, because I know this is the root of everything you do. Like, how is that going to affect the people living here in Waianae? Are they going to be beneficiaries of that clean energy?
Right. So 2045, before I got in, the legislature set a goal for 2045 to make Hawaii 100% renewable energy. Supplied everything that we need off of free electric. And the goal and the way to get there is to develop a combination of big solar farms, small solar farms, community co-ops, as well as rooftop solar. When I was on the neighborhood board, this year's solar farm behind Kamaili Academy was being proposed, 250 acres of solar in a residential community. Anybody knows, that this is probably going to attract heat, right? Like having that massive impact. Yeah, 250 acres of actual solar. So I was concerned about that, landlocking Kamaili Academy, so they couldn't expand because the parcel of land they bought is adjacent to the school, which I'm a alumni of. And they wanted to expand. And like I said, I'm a big supporter of charter schools and their flexibility in teaching our kids. But with that, I was like, what is the benefit for the actual community? Then you dig into it and you find out that this big solar farm is being built on behalf of HECO. And this big solar farm is producing electric at like 12 to 13 cents per kilowatt. And they're selling it to HECO with a little bump on that price. But what HECO does is turn back and sell it to us for like the same price they're selling the petroleum energy. So we're not getting no benefit. They're just making their electric cheaper that they're then reselling to us at a higher rate. So for me, that wasn't fair. There should be a definite community package for the community. So after advocating for like a year, we were able to get an agreement drawn up that they would at least give 2 acres to Kamaili Academy to expand their school footprint. They needed 5 acres, but they settled for 2. Art of compromise, I guess you can say, but in the hood we call them squeezes. You know what I mean? That's a squeeze move right there. And so, you know, I wasn't too happy about that, and what it came down to was that what benefits the community? Rooftop solar. So residential, commercial, rooftop, anything is better than taking up space that is not being used by anything other than the solar and putting that into production only specifically for solar. Like, for example, maybe it would have been more palatable that this solar farm said, we're going to incorporate ag into this, right? We're going to do some ag component, or we're going to do like a teaching component where we're going to teach the kids how to do solar and, you know, do job training stuff. So that was the gist of that big solar farm. There's more big solar farms coming. I feel like we need to put the solar in other communities, not just the Waianae Coast. We shouldn't be the dumping ground for big solar projects, even though I know our sun zone here is among the highest in the state. So it makes a good place for solar, but there's other things that should be considered as well for the best use of that land.
Who handles Waimanalo Gulch? That's not you.
So that's the city. The city handles Waimanalo Gulch. And so there's big debate right now about what that future looks like. According to Mayor Blangiardi, that Waimanalo Gulch will cease to exist in like the next 5 to 8 years. They're gonna try to figure out a way to be more sustainable with the practices of dealing with our opala, and I think that's the right move. Again, speaking to Waianae being the dumping ground, right? That's one of those cases to be made. And then there's also PVT, the commercial landfill, which is up Lolo Naval. We ended up passing a bill to basically discontinue PVT, I believe in 5 years as well, 5 to 6 years. They're not going to be able to utilize that space. And then they were going to expand to across the street. And that has been opposed as well for them to expand. There's some citing of health issues, being so close to all these different chemical waste that is being dumped there and being buried there. So it's a heavily debated conversation that's happening in the community right now. There's actually a bill that recently got passed at the city council level, Bill 39, that was to give tax exemptions to those people living in, I believe, a mile and a mile and a half radius of the PVT landfills. And that is some form of reparation, I guess you can say, for a lot of those people who had to endure all of the dust and smoke and whatever else
comes along with living next to
exactly
a landfill, basically.
Right. And so, there was some issues too, because I believe that our current city council member wasn't supporting that bill, which kind of rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. Like, how you not gonna support a bill that's gonna support your constituents who have been enduring this lifetime of living next to a dump?
Bruh, I mean, that was a random question just because, like, maybe, like, for me, Waianae Gulch is, like, right there.
Yeah.
And, like, I've seen it. So a lot of the work I do around the island involves aerial photography, video, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I've been flying drones all over this island. You know what I mean?
Okay.
And so I think it just offers a different perspective. Kind of like if you paddle out.
Yeah.
And you look at the land. It's just that perspective, huh?
Yeah.
But when you bird's eye, I'm like, that. So two personal, like, gut punches to me. One is Waianae Gulch, because I've seen it literally. It's not a gulch. It's like, it used to be a valley. It's not even a valley anymore. It's it's another ridge, like, but it's a man-made trash ridge. You know what I mean? So that, and then the quarry, Makakilo.
Right.
I was at Kapolei Golf Course at the driving range, and that driving range, when you're standing over there, you're looking straight at this gouge in, like, this gaping wound in this mountain. And when I went after, like, 13 years, like, I left after high school, yeah. And so when I came back, I went with my friend from Honokai.
Okay.
Shout out to Rome. Like, we went to the driving range, and then just hit a ball and just looked. And I didn't even look at the ball. I just looked at this gaping wound in the mountain. And it was like, I remember it felt like I got a gut punch or something hooked to the rib. Like, ooh, because it was just gone. It looked like a wound, yeah. And so those are, like, two very personal things that are kind of like a measuring stick of some sort, or like a hourglass, a sand hourglass of some sort, because it tracks time. Like, what I remember it as is very different now. And if I just kind of make a trajectory, like, down the road, like, what is it going to look like in 10 years, in 20 years? Like, this mountain will be gone. This valley is now it's a mountain now. Like, so those two things are real, like, personal to me and to everybody else living on the west side know what I'm talking about. But, like, I see these changes, and a lot of times I think people feel like they're not powered to affect, again, the they. Mm-hmm. They filled up this trash, even though, hey, that was me too. I was over there dumping Christmas trees over there when I was a kid. You know what I mean? Like, that's me too. The quarry one is a bit different, but nevertheless, you're dealing with big things that take time, and people like you are sort of at the front of it, making the, as you say, changes. I feel like we got a pretty good picture of who you are. Of course, 2 hours isn't enough to get to know any one person, but we know, Cedric, what you're doing as far as a state representative, even a chairman of councils that you mentioned. But, like, I kind of want to end on more of a personal note, if you don't mind. Like, for me, as a 30-something, you know what I mean? Like, West Side, how was it, like, for you growing up here? I know you kind of we dove into it a little bit, but, like, as, let's say, a multi-ethnic child, every time I see, the way I explain it to my wife is this. She's like, oh, how come you always do this when you see another black guy? And I'm like, yeah, that's just like a universal thing. Like, we just say what's up. And I feel like in Hawaii, it's kind of that too, but, like, we all brown. You know what I mean? I'm not giving away the secret. But there's kind of like, like, the black in Hawaii voice, even though typically I don't even like to identify with race anyway. I think, we all human, right? But I think the Popolo story in Hawaii, there's a lot of people who are making efforts in that to share that voice as one of the many, because Hawaii is Hawaii, right? There's everybody here. But I was like, like, that kind of head nod here thing, it still happens, but I think it's a more diluted, just because we all used to this multi-ethnic group, and our parents represent that too, right? And so for you, and especially someone with siblings, you guys growing up, like, in Waianae, West Side, was there any kind of, like, pushback in that sense of like being the black guy, or were you identify more as like the other side? For me, like nobody says, "Oh, the Japanese guy," even though I have Japanese, you know, with the Japanese name.
Right.
I just look so like how was that for you? You know what I mean? Like multi-ethnic, Waianae kind of things.
Yeah, no, for sure. You know, there were times, you know, one of the weirdest things I guess we'll talk about right now was being in school, intermediate, and watching Roots. Watching Roots in
You
intermediate.
watched Roots in intermediate?
Yes, that was just the most awkward conversation, most like I don't know what the heck is going on. Like, I'm trying to process all of this. Like, they're trying to say, oh, we got to learn about our history, right? And then you watching this freaking theatrical Roots taking place, and you're like, and then all your classmates are looking at you because you're the only dude, Popolo guy in there. And that was one of the most weirdest experience. I need to go follow up. I hope they're not playing that no more, man. Like, we got better representation. We can tie it into Barack Obama or like, you know, Martin Luther King. Like, keep with that kind of Black history. Not getting hit with Roots at intermediate was traumatic. I'll just say that.
Everybody look, hey, so.
And you know, Roots was like 4 or 5 series. Like, it was multiple VCRs at the time. We was watching on VCR, so you have to like change the VCR. All right, class, first day we're gonna watch the first episode of like Roots, and like we went through that whole process. Anyways, that was just a mind mess. It messed with my mind a little bit.
I think there's we're America. A lot of the reason, like my father, a lot of fathers, because I think a lot of like Black military or Black service members. You know what I mean?
My father was military
too.
too.
So that's our common like story. So the America factor we can't ignore. So when you're talking about like American history, we're gonna cover the Civil Rights Movement. We're gonna cover this, and then automatically it's like we got to represent that. All the eyes can come to you, right?
Right.
But, bruh, that's so separated from us, though. That's so separated from our experience. Like, I don't know. You talk about the Roots, like, what's Boys in the Hood, or like these other movies that are kind of like coming of age, young American, African American male movies.
Right.
But, bruh, that's not my experience.
Yeah.
So, but to everybody else, I am.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, I remember feeling kind of like that awkwardness of like, I represent that to you guys or in this room or in this grade. Right. But, bro, I don't know shit about that. I didn't grow up in the hood in whatever, Compton, Watts. Like, that's America.
Right.
Or to say mainland. Like,
mainland, yeah.
I don't know at this point as a child. Like, I didn't have that Black African American experience that is represented in these kind of movies and stuff. And so a lot of times I was like, I guess that's me, but like, I don't really know. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not.
You don't see the direct connection for your life and how you've been living to what they're portraying the life of an average African American, for example.
And it took me I spent 5 years in Oregon, which it's Oregon, enough said, Portland, Oregon. But at least I was closer to like that image. And I was like, oh, this is kind of what I've been putting up with, you know, like the last 10 years in Hawaii, which is very different. And I think that's a very unique point of view where you're growing up Black, African-American, I should say, in a place that's the furthest outlier of America.
Yeah, and I'll just put this plug in again, going back to my pops. The biggest reason he's from Gary, Indiana.
No way.
Yeah, military.
I've been to Gary.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
I've been to Indiana. Yeah. But one of the key reasons why when he got out of the military, he wanted to live here and raise a family here was because it was like the opposite of the mainland, right? The Howleys was getting, you know, treated a certain way where people of color was being treated with respect and dignity, and you know, it was flipped. So he was like, how we're living in an alternate universe. And I think that's going to Martin Luther King when he came down here to speak to the legislature. He said that, you know, he's seen what the future of America could be, right? Which is that melting pot, where people of different racial backgrounds are treated with aloha, with the love and respect everyone deserves. Um, and I think that's what my dad seen too when he got here. It was like, okay, this is where we can plant seeds and raise a family and not have to worry about them, you know, getting chased. Because my dad told me about times he got chased home from school by, you know, a mob of white people, and like how that forever ingrained in him, and you know how he had to move differently compared to us who are being privileged by being here and calling Hawaii our home.
What do you know when his because I've seen pictures of Martin Luther King Jr.'s visit to Hawaii and getting lays and stuff,
Yep.
right? Do you know if that was before or after his "I Have a Dream" speech? Like just off the.
I want to say it was about 1959, I believe, is when he came down.
Oh man. Okay. Well,
Was I Have a Dream speech like 1960? I want to say it could have
I
been.
want to say it was closer to yeah, like, but I'm hearing like when you said it that way about well, I guess you're quoting him, but or paraphrasing him, but this is the future of America. Like I didn't put it together until just now. But like, yeah, he saw it back then too. What is this, 60 years ago, something like that? He saw how this was a version of America, but very different from that America.
Mm-hmm.
And so, wow, that really kind of
Yeah,
freaking drove the point home for me, man.
it was surreal too when I you know, found out, you know, he spoke to the state legislature, and I remember reading his transcripts and watching or listening to the audio, and it just gave me chills. Like, wow, this guy was ahead of his time, and he knew that being here was important to, you know, promote what his mission and message was of that racial equality and unity amongst all of us as people, and going back to the human aspect rather than the color of the skin or, you know, any other things that you look at our surface rather than what's in us.
Bruh. Dang. Like, I've been having this. So my brother, obviously same as me, right? Black Japanese, growing up in Hawaii. We were talking about growing up, our influences as far as like, because we grew up a single parent household.
Oh,
So really, I'm more Japanese than I'm black in that term because my Japanese American mom raised us. And then we would visit dad in the summers.
mm-hmm.
He lived in Chicago, but we would visit. That's when I went to Gary, Indiana.
Right.
We drove from Chicago to Gary. And like, I remember that experience and being like, this is a different world to me. It's a different world. And back then I didn't know how to say it, but now I know. I was like, we was in the projects. And the first drive-by experience was in Gary, Indiana.
Wow.
And like now putting together the pieces, I'm like, yo, that's what some people might associate like my experience with as an American, but not as like a person who grew up in Hawaii. Because it's very, very different part of America. And I think we might have experienced some of that struggle. I think less now because there's more content out there for people to educate themselves with if they choose, or just different representations at large. There's a lot more different representations. Back then we were VHS tapes or whatever, you know?
Yeah.
So it wasn't just like a click of a button away of like seeing something else.
Right.
So we were automatically like delegates of this image, you know what I mean? That was being, in your case, like, here we are, here's cassette number 4.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I can't fucking answer your questions type of pressure. But
No, I agree that's definitely the huge switch that we've been making now in the age of technology is having that diversity being showcased across all platforms. And we already know in terms of manipulating the masses, we can talk about what type of images were being placed in front of our eyes to make us believe in certain concepts, right? Whether it was us being too undereducated to ever compete with people of Caucasian descent, or, you know, always being portrayed as a clown or, you know, a coon or whatever you want to call it. All of these things were what has shaped the minds of so many people, and you don't even really know that you're being manipulated in that way because it's happening subconsciously, and you just have this thought in your head that these people are automatically associated with grabbing your purse or robbing you. And I've had experiences down here where I'm walking and by myself and I'm looking fresh. I've got my polo on, khakis, clean shoes, and then you see somebody just switch the arm of their purse, like when they're walking past you, grab it from this side, put it on this side, hold it tighter. And it's like, okay, and you want to play around with it and you want to jump at them like, just scare them because that they're in their own head thinking about you're being a threat. And that's also just the reality that we have to deal with. And, I've dealt with some definitely racist stuff out in parts of, my job, but that's given, I think.
So not just the age thing, but compounded with, let's say, a racist card.
Yeah, for sure. And then compound that with being from Waianae. You know what I
The
mean?
young Popolo guy from Waianae. There you go. That's the triple attack.
And so, for me, one of the things that was really important was that I knew I was a representation of the younger generation. So me being put on the platform, like I said, when I got elected, it was a big deal. It was like, this kid is 23. He unseated the only incumbent in the damn election. Where did this kid come from? Like, I was like front page news, talking to everybody, like news interviews after news interviews about how I got elected, how I took out an incumbent 6 years in, because it was so unexpected. And so one of my first interviews that I gave to Hawaii News Now, after I started accomplishing stuff in the legislature, was that the community just need to send more young people to the legislature. If you want things done, because like I was a phenomenon. I'm not even trying to toot my horn, but people were so interested on how does this kid come from this background and do what people would say the impossible. I kept saying, like, the younger generation is what's going to change the dynamics of politics, because I also know people are fed up with politics. I was one of those people that was fed up with politics and was like, the way things are operating is backwards. The way we should be moving is forward. And we need to stop letting things hold us back from doing what's in the best interest of our community. And one of the things that I felt so strongly about is that, like I mentioned earlier, dealing with the kitchen table issues. Stop worrying about all of the X, Y's, and Z's out there. Let's focus on 5 key components. Let's focus on healthcare. Let's focus on housing, education, focusing on, health in general for our communities. Knowing I've sat on the Waianae Comprehensive Health Center's board of directors for about 3 years, and you look at the data and the statistics for our community, when 50% of your residents suffer from some type of dietary related disease, we got problems, right? When your community is considered a food desert because the lack of access to fresh produce and healthy food is limited. When the economics behind your community is limited, right? Where some of the best jobs are going to be at Long, CVS, or you know what I mean? That's the reality, right? Especially for a lot of people who may not get college degrees or have some type of trade that they learn or skilled to apply, slim pickings for them. And, that's why one of the things that we did was try to create a, higher education system out here. And we've done that in recent years where now you can get a full AA degree at Leeward Community College Moku, Waianae Moku, which is located on St. John's Road, or not on St. John's Road, but right next to St. John's right next to Miley Elementary School. So right there's a whole college program where you can graduate with your A. And funny story, I was going to college when I got elected in 2016. I was a college student.
At this place you're talking about?
Yeah, Leeward. And also I was working for our congressional delegation at the federal building in downtown. So I was in school, working feds, and running for office. I had a full plate, and it was a great experience for sure. And it was about getting people excited about the election, getting people, giving some people something to vote for, you know?
Can we end on this note then of giving people something to vote for? Because it's an election. We're about to get right into this election cycle, right? Or campaign cycle, I should say. Or it's already started. But like, what advice do you have then for this young person in Waianae who, let's say, just turned 18 and can vote? What kind of message would you want to leave with them as they go into this election cycle?
Your vote matters. And I've always asked myself, you know, why didn't somebody do this? Why didn't somebody do that? Until you realize you're that somebody. And that somebody can change the world. Firm believer, absolute proof of that. One of the things that I think people have to understand is that there's strength in numbers. And when you're able as a community to show those numbers to the decision makers and the people that are actually going to pull the trigger on getting projects completed for your community, they look at the votes. And that's just the reality. Our governor, our mayor, they look at the votes of your community and sometimes determine what type of support to give your community depending on how much votes are being shown. It's called voting blocks. But that's something that we as a community have to grow here on the Waianae Coast, because when we have a louder voice, when our votes are coming out by the thousands, that will get the attention of the people that need to be paying attention to what our needs are, and getting them to act on those requests that are being made by people like me and you. And, you know, also understanding the political dynamics, right? It's like, it's hard sometimes because, for example, it's give and take. People who, you know, can be very outspoken, a lot of times, if it's not directed properly, it can backfire and you can hurt actually getting the progress for whatever issue you're doing. So it's a give and take game too, because, you know, sometimes you got to be vocal, but at the end of the day, if we all come together, and that's why my campaign slogan is Unify Waianae, is that when we band together, we can accomplish many great things. And there's proof of that. You know, whether we was talking about the Waianae High School football field, that was community driven. We talk about Pokai Bay and the jetties, that's community driven. People from the community saying we need this kind of stuff. And the list can go on and on, but that's what your vote matters. That's how you're going to help move our community forward, by being that voice that usually was on the sidelines, but now you're in the game by casting your ballot. And I hope that inspires people to get interested. You can also follow me on Instagram, Cedric Gates, and Facebook, Cedric Asuenga Gates.
Hey, thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. I think the West Side gonna hear this one.
Yeah, no, there's definitely great content, and I know we've had an amazing conversation today.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Yeah. So we were done until I found something else out about you, which explains this. Here we go, baby. We gotta match the theme.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, tell me, where do we start with this?
So this year I introduced a bill to have adult use for cannabis outside of the medical program. So what we call it at the legislature is dual use. So both medical and recreational use of cannabis. I think that one of the major factors for this is for us to create more revenue and economic stimulation for our islands. I think that one of the biggest things that we want to do is reinvest the funds that are created through a dual use program or adult use program of cannabis to go back to the community. And whether it's mental health treatment and increasing the services when it comes to that, education we can talk about, or even our transportation for our roads, allocating funds to go to that. We're still in discussions of what that could be like. But yeah, so based on that introduction of the bill, there was some pushback from the House because the Senate actually passed it out almost unanimously. I think it was like maybe 24-1 to pass dual use for the state. It was the House of Representatives that kind of stalled the bill from moving out of the House and returning back to the Senate. Remember that process I talked to you about?
Yeah.
Since it came out, the origins is from the Senate. It has to go back to the Senate for final reading after it goes through the House. So we didn't get to push it out of the House this year, but we have commitments from chairs in the committee as well as leadership to push a bill next year, 2024, to create a commission or I want to say a board for cannabis and to be able to allow for people to integrate into the cannabis market. I'm the chair of agriculture and the food systems. Of course, cannabis is a plant, and so it'd fall under my committee, and it would be something that I would have to put on an agenda. We would hear it, get community input, and basically go from there in terms of moving the bill through the other committees that it would have to go through, probably judiciary, finance, for example, other committees that it would have to pass in order to get to where we want it to be, which is on the governor's desk.
Which means once it's on the governor's desk, it's as good as like the rule has changed, the law has changed.
So yes, we have a thing called effective dates for a bill. So say we pass a bill in May of this year. The effective date generally is like July 1st, maybe of this year, or it could be January 1st of the next year. Oh, okay. So for example, like if we pass a bill next year, 2024, the effective date will most likely be the following year, January 1st or something like that, to then allow for all the processes to get set up so that when legalization goes live, all of the pieces that need to be in place and the components that will make it a successful program are in place to be able to administer the program correctly and not get the pushback that a lot of other places get when it comes to talking about legalization of cannabis.
So I moved to Oregon in 2003.
Okay. Very, very green state.
Graduated from Campbell High School in 2003. And then that fall, I was in Portland, Oregon.
Okay.
And we all know Portland, Oregon, a lot of the other West Coast states as well. But at that time, I believe Colorado was the only one who had even been like a trailblazer in terms of like medical use, right? Mm-hmm. So it's still new.
Yeah.
Like the green cross thing, the imagery and stuff that we associate with it. It was very new. And now, I mean, this is literally 20 years ago, right? And at that time, I had come from Hawaii, which I'm like, bro, you know what I mean? Just follow your nose if you like, you know what I mean?
Right.
So recreational use, like I recreationally smoke weed, basically. And so I was like, what are my options of not getting arrested?
Yeah.
I think in Hawaii at large, it's more of a kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like, whatever. And when I went to Oregon, it was more like, I thought like it opened my eyes to cannabis as not just a recreational use to like feel good. You know what I mean? It kind of made me, it literally made me respect it more as a herb, as a plant, as a medicine, because I volunteered at a medical cannabis industry in Portland, Oregon. And me just thinking, oh, free bud, you know what I mean? I get trimming, shoots. Like, it turned into something more deeper than that because I was surrounded with these old white guys, basically, green thumbs, been growing for who knows how long. Mm-hmm. And they put me on game.
Right.
And then I started learning about it. And then it wasn't just recreational, like, yay type shit. It turned into an appreciation and understanding, and actually, like, I would even say, like, I'm not gonna say, like, at this time in my life I was a freshman in university, so you do the freshman university kind of things.
Mm-hmm.
But now let's put that in contrast with Japan, because I lived in Japan,
Mm-hmm.
where they treat it like a Schedule 1 substance.
Right.
Everything is the same.
Mm-hmm.
Heroin, that's the same as weed, basically over there, effectively. If it's not alcohol or tobacco, that's a no-no.
And that's the same for America.
At large, right?
Yeah, at large. Correct.
And so now this chapter, moving back home, and now the medical use is very widely, it's everywhere. You see dispensaries, you know what I mean? Like part 3, what is it? The 328 card,
328
B. So like it's coming.
Yeah.
It's coming. And it feels like about damn time.
Right.
So when you told me that you're the guy who's basically making this happen in Hawaii, I was like, wait, we got to get back. We got to get this part, because I got questions, First of all, okay, you gave us a kind of a timeline.
Yeah.
Right there. You gave us a timeline of what we can expect. Even if the bills pass next year, the effective date might not be next year. Okay.
Correct.
Now let's talk about, why has it taken so long? Again, I went to Oregon in 2003. It was like already a thing, like medical. You could have this. I don't know if they called it 328B back then. I don't know. But you could get the card. And then basically, I was in the process of being a caregiver,
Mm-hmm.
which is a little different. And I don't know,
Correct.
again, this is 20 years ago type stuff. Whereas I could then grow and and provide to a patient who has this kind of
Correct.
experience, right? And so now that I'm here in 2023, you're saying that, hey, man, this thing is like
It's right around
here.
the corner.
It's here.
Yeah.
I'm stoked, but also like, give me the lowdown as far as like how it's going to affect. What kind of effects can I expect? What kind of changes as far as money? Because I always thought, like, man, this should be just put a tax on it, and then boom, now we got more tax money, more Waianae
Filled money.
more Waianae field money,
Yep.
etc.
Yep.
I was like, yeah, of course.
Right.
And we're in a tourist-centric state
Correct.
where tourists come here looking for that, and they're
Right.
getting it.
They're
Just
getting
it's
it
not
on the
getting
black
taxed.
market.
Yeah, they're getting it.
Exactly.
So I could see the opposition being the people who provide it,
Yeah.
obviously. But tell me about the stuff that this guy doesn't know about that I should know about.
No, so I think that you're right. It has taken a while. We were able to enact the medical cannabis cards, I believe in about a decade ago. We're going on a decade now. And it's only 30,000 actual card holders exist in the entire state. And when you look at that market, how only 30,000 people, and only out of the 30,000 people that have cards, only 12,000 access legal cannabis through a medical dispensary. So that says that majority of people who getting cannabis, even if those who have medical cards, are not getting it from the dispensary, they're getting it from black market, or what they want to call a legacy market. And that's what we're trying to integrate into the legal market. We want to integrate the legacy market guys that have been supplying, our communities for generations potentially, right?
Yeah.
And try to get them to do it the right way, do it where their butt is covered, right? Where they don't have to be looking over their shoulders the way they do probably today. And try to encourage them to be a part of the system and to help create a system that works for everybody. Win-win situation, going back to that again. That's our goal about introducing and passing the bill. The key factor I want to mention in all of this is that we're working directly with the Attorney General's office to draft a bill that will be palatable to law enforcement too, because that's also been one of the biggest oppositions in the passing of legalization, is the law enforcement agencies generally don't support cannabis.
That was my question. Who's the biggest opposer? And you're saying it's law enforcement.
I want to say it's law enforcement. We also just had our city prosecutor, Steve Alms, come out against legalization as well. So generally speaking, it's law enforcement that are the biggest opponents. And then you also have concerned parents, which they rightfully deserve the right to feel the way they do or have concerns the way they do. And I think the important part about us drafting a bill that's a win-win is incorporating those ideas of that are coming from the parents and incorporating the ideas and the voices that are coming from the people, and try to draft something that will kind of be a catch-all for everybody, but also have the key components to make sure that the program's successful, because we don't want an unsuccessful program, because that's two separate things, right? It's having a successful programs means that we're getting adequate tax dollars. The program is being administered correctly. There's not a lot of red tape that increases the price for cannabis for the end user. All of these different things that we need to factor in to draft the bill that's going to be acceptable to the masses. That's what it's going to take. A lot of outreach, a lot of discussions, and we're doing that now. I think we want to just get the core nuts and bolts of the bill settled and then take it out to the community once we have somewhat of a finished product, and then they can give the tweaks to then make it a better program than what we've come up with personally.
So making the program palatable is like maybe the first hurdle. Getting it across the governor's desk, second hurdle, maybe.
Governor Green has come out in support of legalizing cannabis, and that's also why we didn't introduce the bill during Ige's terms of being in office, because he was not in support of legalization. So he made that very clear that anything that reached his desk, he wasn't going to sign, and he probably was going to veto. So no sense all of us go through the trouble of trying to push this through just to meet opposition at the highest level of government, which is our governor. And then you got to understand that he controls the Department of Health, he controls the Department of Ag, he controls the Department of Transportation, Department of Law, Attorney General's office, law enforcement, all of these things. So if they're not all on board, then we're gonna legalize it, and it's just gonna be a battlefield of these folks trying to, resist the actual policies that are being made by legislators.
Would you? Here's another question I had, because I have many, but in my personal experience, I've noticed a lot more of my aunties, uncles of that generation having a paradigm shift to the point where they're embracing edibles. They're not taking bong rips, you know what I mean, smoking blunts, like, you know what I mean? But they are eating edibles. Yeah. And they're eating it in a more medicinal way versus recreational, meaning they're not eating edible and going to the beach. Yeah. They're winding down at the end of the day to go to sleep, eating an edible. Right. And so I found myself in a situation where I'm like, hey, Mom, I got some shake for you. Because she was interested in making some butter, right? Making some edibles. And this is the same woman who, like 10 years ago, I had to hide my weed from. Yeah. You know what I mean? And so if we're talking about this sort of this trajectory of this plant into lives of people here in Hawaii, what ages do you think, or let's put it this way, what benefits are at each age group? So like for, let's say 20-year-olds, 40-year-olds, 60-year-olds, 80-year-olds, like what kind of benefits are hitting each of these age groups?
So for me, I think that one of the key factors is looking at science and looking at how our body interacts with cannabis at certain age groups. So, of course, factoring all of that in, looking at the statistics on how we govern appropriately, and then also about the dosage amounts and things like that. We're still getting into the nitty-gritty of those kind of stuff. But in terms of generational support, I agree with you. There is definitely a paradigm shift happening amongst the older generations, which have been kind of the gatekeepers, I guess you can say, of the legalization movement. And I think that there is a lot more support in terms of the benefits and the understanding how this can be a great substitute for those, for example, on pills, right? And we know how pills damage the liver and all these different things. And of course, cannabis probably is best consumed as an edible because there isn't any smoke inhalation and things like that. But we have to talk about also being a nanny state. I'm just gonna throw that out there.
Yeah.
That's where I come from. It's like, okay, this illegal, that illegal, everything's pretty much illegal. And when you make everything illegal, you just are creating a black market. And I think that's something that has been lost in translation of what we're actually doing when we make things illegal or prohibit things from being sold in our islands. We're just giving opportunity for people in the illegal market to then use that money and then invest more into the illegal market. And then that's where you also see crime rates and organized stuff like that occurring in our community. Cause there's all this cash to be made because people want it. And that's where I feel like the nanny state mindset has to shift as well of our government, because if we remove a lot of the red tapes that, for example, DPP, to do something for your house, it takes maybe a year if you're lucky, maybe 2 years if you're unlucky, to get permits and all of these stuff done. And looking at ways like that and putting it into the realm of cannabis and saying, okay, look at these testing requirements, how all of these testing requirements are costing the manufacturer or the people that are growing all of this extra money that then gets passed to the consumer. The prices is too high at the dispensaries. The consumer can get it cheaper in the community, decent, probably comparable quality. And then, you end up in that revolving door. It's like, okay, the prices are set at this, but they have to set the prices at that because of the overhead that they're got to go deal with in terms of administering the state's medical program. That's the example.
I see a beautiful parallel here between what we're talking about earlier about relationships in the streets and relationships in the state capitol to prices in the streets to prices in a, let's say, dispensary. And like at the end of the day, the consumer, like let's be clear, there's no shortage of demand in Hawaii.
100%.
Right? So that demand will be supplied. The question is who's supplying it.
Correct.
And now if we go the route of, let's say, now this is a regulated goods that's on the market, the pricing of that good, like you said, is going to be basically decided by the manufacturer, and the cost of operations, the cost of goods, basically these things that they might have to pay for, that gets either they can decide to put it on us, the consumers, or at the end of the day, we're going to have the option of going to you or somebody else. The legacy, how you said, the legacy growers. I'll go into the legacy market or to the regulated market.
Right.
And my experience being on both sides in both this country as well as not this country. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. We'll keep it at that.
I will say that having the options, one, is good for the consumer.
Yeah.
Right. But then as a manufacturer, you're going to look at to your left, be like, okay, let's see what the legacy market's doing. This is what I'm doing. One thing I've seen when I go into the, let's say, regulated market is, I didn't expect it, but the quality was top notch. Maybe it's because of these regulations that are in place and like these kinds of, I'll say measurable results and sort of like rules, basically rules and regulations, right? And reporting and stuff like that, and having probably inspection processes and stuff. So it's like what comes out of that is amazing. You know what I mean? And I wasn't used to that because I was in a legacy market, and I don't know, or whatever you say,
right?
Whatever you tell me, like you put this is sour D's. Is it?
Right.
You know what I mean? This is X%. Like this is a hybrid. That's the first time I actually like looked at percentages of a hybrid. I mean, like, this is whatever 70%, right? Was that CBD. Is in Portland, Oregon, at a dispensary where you just got to show your license, not some other card that it paid money for. Like just I'm an adult. I walk in and then I was like, I never seen a menu like this, and I didn't even know certain properties of this plant that I thought I was familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's one benefit to the regulation part is like, you know what you're getting.
Right.
You know what you're getting, and there's actually accountability on the
100%.
manufacturer side. So that's the argument for me that I always like. That's why I want to walk into a dispensary.
Right.
Legacy is just the convenience, but also probably at this stage where we are right now, 2023, is like, I just know there's a trust factor kind of built in.
Yeah.
Versus like, hey, stranger, I don't know what I'm getting. So it's like, it's going to be interesting, this sort of transitory period.
Yeah, I think so.
I think there's a lot of people like me who are like just waiting because, the legacy is going to be legacy.
Yeah.
But with the opportunity of having something like this, there's one right here in Colina.
Yeah, I know. I know, because you know why? You already know they're probably anticipating that the legalization is around the corner.
It's right next to a brewery,
and so and let's talk about that too. It's like we have legalization on alcohol, for example.
Yeah.
And my whole thing about prohibition has been that look at what the ban on alcohol did. It created a mafia. It created all of these guys illegally making all the alcohol. Yep. And that's exactly what legalization will solve, I believe, in a lot of this. That it'll take these guys from having this absolute power and authority over this legacy market and put it more into the hands of the consumer, as you mentioned about the testing requirements. That is key. If you think about grandma who doesn't know too much about cannabis, and she's looking for it and she's finding some blowjo off the street to sell it to her, we don't know what kind of heavy metals are in there. We don't know about type of pesticides they're using.
Exactly.
It's all unsure. And, you're exposing people who are generally law-abiding citizens who are using cannabis to this unhealthy, unregulated market. And so there is definitely a need to shift on that. And we look at even fireworks, right? A perfect example, right? Yeah. I think fireworks got worse after the ban than it was with it legalized. Because there was a time where you could buy aerials everything from Kmart and whatever, go
Kmart.
Remember Kmart?
Yeah.
That was our spot. But yeah, I remember going in there, getting all the fireworks we wanted, all on those big pallets, and everybody got a permit pretty much. And, you do it that way. And then you look at today and it's like, it's everybody pyrotechnics.
You're right.
Here.
It feels like, is there more now?
Yeah.
And I know that's a great parallel because for those you don't understand, like Hawaii fireworks is a thing.
Yes.
It's a major thing. Like there's people who spend $10,000 on fireworks. They literally burning their money, right?
Yeah.
And that's just one guy on the street. There's probably a whole line.
Yeah.
And so like you
thousands
can see
of these guys
some legit
everywhere.
Like fireworks shows. You know what I mean? Hey, comment the best show to watch on the wall.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it's like, I don't know, White Power, whoever Beach, fucking Waianae. Like I say that to say black market, or we will put legacy market.
Yeah. There's
a demand. The legacy market is going to serve that demand.
Exactly.
And I feel like if you say no, then it's like, who's the most happiest is that person who's going to supply it.
Yep.
And everyone who's involved on the fringes of that supply, because there's someone supplying this. There's somewhere like
100%.
It's happening.
Yeah.
And it won't stop happening. So why not in the case of cannabis?
Yeah.
Right. To your point about quality control.
Yeah.
That's my biggest thing. Like quality control. When my mom is buying at, let's say, the dispensary, first of all, I don't know if she would like, how would she feel like going on the streets? Right. You know what I mean? But then having that quality and having the other part you said was the on that same note of quality is like some people don't understand with cannabis the growing process. I think a lot of people don't, and that's the biggest takeaway I had of being volunteering at that medical cannabis industry in Portland, Oregon, was learning the process of raising this plant. And there's a very important process. It's called flushing. It's toward the end of before you harvest, weeks before you harvest, you're flushing any kind of fertilizers and anything you might have used to increase the vegetative growth or flowering process, right? And you're kind of flushing it out. Some people don't do that. Some people don't do that because they want the biggest bud or most crystally. Like you have room for human tendencies too. And the person who grew your buds might be motivated differently than someone else. And so at the end of the day, what you actually, if you burn it, if you consume it, no matter how you do it, like you don't know. You don't know.
I just thought of something though. How about this? How huge do you think the organic market of cannabis will be, bro? Like, think about that. Like,
okay,
because we're talking about flushing and making sure everything's kosher, I guess you could say.
Dude. So look at look at coffee.
Yep.
I would say look at coffee, look at acai bowls, look at tapioca boba tea, look at these markets where foodies, just go and put foodie in your Instagram Explorer feed, right? I go to food because health, wellness, food kind of tied in together. And I don't know if you know, but like my family had a salad dressing.
Okay.
They still do. It's called Swisson dressing. And I was at the helm for a few years. And so part of this sort of 4-year run while I'm handling this consumer packaged good in Hawaii, I learned a lot about physical goods, manufacturing, distribution, all that, right? And in my sort of wild like ideation phase, I thought, why don't I make a CBD or THC cannabis version of this salad dressing? Right? I was like, oh, that'd be great.
Yeah, that would.
Right? So I thought about it. At the time, I was like, whoa, there's way too much red tape, regulations and stuff like that. I can't even afford to do that.
Right.
But I thought about that picture of who would the person buying this be?
Yeah.
Is this person who's health, wellness, let's say even holistic, who shops at Whole Foods.
Yeah.
Like this is going to be on the shelf at Whole Foods.
Right.
And I got so excited with that because there was nothing like it. There's nothing like it, at least here in Hawaii. Probably at Erewhon or somewhere like, it's out there. But in Hawaii, if there was this kind of product that had basically, it was the aunties who are eating edibles right now just to go to sleep would get at Safeway, Foodland, Whole Foods, right? Tamura's.
Yeah.
I thought about what that would look like. And it wouldn't just be salad dressings. It would be,
anything and everything. Yeah, it can't. I mean, you could make a whole store like Tamura's, just all cannabis or CBD's based products in that store. And I think the land of opportunity exists in this cannabis market. The thing about why we need to do it now more than ever is that there's all these conversations happening at the federal level for descheduling cannabis, as well as all of the expungement of records. We can talk about also internationally that, Thailand is just legalized all of these different places are legalizing cannabis because they see the value in legalization and the impact economically, socially that it can have for their nations. But also what we don't want to happen is that we wait so long that feds actually legalize it before the state does. State has no framework in place to actually regulate cannabis legally. And all these mainland corporations come in here under the support of our federal government and take advantage of all this opportunity that exists for our local people if we get ahead of the curveball. One of the things that I'll just kind of go into quickly is that one of the components that we're really stressing is the social equity aspect of the legalization market. How do we create a way that people from all walks of life, people who have got arrested for selling cannabis, are able to get into the legal market without all of the hurdles and red tapes, and also be given an advantage because, we are legalized something that we criminalize them for, and we're doing it off of the economics as well as the other aspects of having support for programs and communities across our state. But that is something that we're really strongly looking at. I know we're looking at Massachusetts, Maine's model, and the last one is Minnesota's model. So we're looking at all of these different models, and we're trying to take pieces that we can put together. New York has some pieces and components that we can take and adopt as our own, but ultimately we want to use the best practices that currently exist to create this model, and we want to work with our own constituencies here in Hawaii to make the model unique to Hawaii itself. For example, I'll say our genetics for cannabis, right? How do we capitalize on the genetic aspects of the Maui Wowies or the Kona Golds or all of the different strains that exist in the legacy market, and make sure that it doesn't get exploited? Like if you remember Aloha Poke, where there was in the mainland trying to trademark Aloha Poke as their own, and trying to cease and desist anybody else who had the name. So those are like things that we have to have foresight on right now, so that we get ahead of the people that may be predatory for this opportunity, and try to make it where it's a win-lose situation rather than a win-win. And on that win-win side of it, the way we can do that in this legalization market is doing it horizontally, and doing it in a way where we can have craft growers, we can have people who just do delivery services, we have people who do, Yelp or Weed Maps or stuff like that, right? And have those markets for those guys, so that you don't necessarily have to grow to reap the benefits of having a legalization market in Hawaii. And whether it's tourism and the hotels, like, Thailand, I was looking at, there's resorts where you can just, like, it's a cannabis resort. So, like, instead of drinking all day and getting wasted off of alcohol, you can literally hang out at the pool and have a J and just relax and enjoy your time, and all legal, right? And not have to look over your shoulders and know that the quality and the protection for you as a consumer are in place, so that if anything negative does happen, there's a way for you to reconciliate, redo all of the things that you need to do for making it right for you. Kind of
No, well, dude, because like I said, I have so many questions. But another one that you kind of touched upon, but I want to clarify on, is what kind of what kind of effects retroactively will... Wait, see? No, we didn't burn before this. I know everybody's...
Hey,
no, we did it. But... people could be thinking, oh, these guys...
Exactly.
We did it. But I just, there's a lot of hype in me that I'm trying to, get up. What's going to happen to the people who have criminal records from this kind of thing? Like, is there any kind of retroactive action that could lead to, let's say, expungement, or people getting lesser sentences, or because when it's legalized, it's like, you over there in jail, because of this, right? That's now it's just buying at Kmart, or there's no Kmart anymore. But is there any kind of retroactive?
Yeah, so there's going to be a clemency program where it's like automatic expungement for dismissed cases and minor convictions. Okay. If you're pushing pounds on pounds on pounds, you might still be in a situation legally. Okay. If you're not paying your taxes, right, and doing it the legal way, because there's going to be the legalization market, right? So there's going to be pathways for that to be able to do that. So basically, what we're looking at right now is that there's going to be a collaboration with the Department of Corrections, as well as our Department of our Judiciary branch of government, to look at all the cases. Of course, ideally, we'd like to have AI, do all of this, to be able to just process everybody's case, look at everything, and see where all of these people qualify to get out of their cases with whatever cannabis issues they might have had. And then, in terms of if there needs to be, for example, maybe a lighter sentence for somebody who is doing something, in combination with cannabis, for example, there's conversations around that. But I think ultimately creating I want to say a board or a commission where you have the different branches of government and agencies work together to determine who gets out, basically who qualifies for early release, whatever the case may be, to be able to do that in collaboration with each other, so there's no gaps in people getting out as this process is legalized.
So another question I had that you brought up right there was, so in the beginning, you're saying it's better to go horizontal with this, versus a vertical integration.
Correct.
Why?
Because we are looking at how can we spread the pot amongst the most people rather than all the power being concentrated in a vertical program. And so, for example, a vertical program meaning that the person does the growing, retailing, everything under the sun for the production of cannabis, where this horizontal model will allow for those people who are vertical, most likely, because there are the medical dispensaries that currently exist, and that's completely vertical. Yeah. So I think there will be some way to make what they're doing good grandfathered in to a sense, so that they're not prohibited from keeping their current model, which they invested millions of dollars into creating, and not penalize them to the effect. But what it will also hopefully do too with having this whole vertical model still in existence with the medical guys is that they're going to be able to be the first day sales people when cannabis goes, because we also don't want, I think, and this may be more personal than as a collective amongst my colleagues, but I want to see the best interest of the community being represented in the policy being made, and that includes giving preference to Native Hawaiian, preference to those that have been convicted for possession or distribution potentially, and how do we right those wrongs, I guess you can say, and be able to make it a fair and balanced approach to all. And with that, what I think about with the first day sales guy is that it kind of fills somewhat of the gap during, because like for average person, you're gonna say, I hear legalization just passed, it's legal ASAP, right? But for those guys, I think that we need messaging, of course, to be clear about what that legalization means and how it's to be implemented, and then also to not make people wait so long. Because if you wait, say if we pass a bill, in 2024, we try to implement in 2026, that's just too long of a timeline, so that people will be just basically building up to everything, and then whether it's legal or not, it's uncontrollable, I guess. So that's a concern that's being mentioned amongst the folks talking about this right now. And I think it's all fluid. Everything's still fluid right now. I want everybody to know that, considerations are still being made for the variety of voices that exist in our community around this issue. So nothing's set in stone, and what our goal is to have win-wins, right? Where everybody can get the needs of their selves and their interests met in terms of safety, in terms of regulations and accessibility.
Question about, because everyone thinks Maui Waui, Kona Gold, right? Like, is there an IP behind that? Can that be owned? For example, a strain?
Yes, it can. It's basically, if you know Monsanto's, then you know that's basically that's what they're all about, is plant genetics, and that's how they're able to patent these things and kind of control the market, to be 100% honest with you, of what types of variety of produce can be used, or wheat or rice or whatever you're trying to grow. They have specific, if you need a crop that's going to grow that's resistant to wind or whatever, they have a seed just for that. So in terms of the possibility for maybe even the state potentially. We'll see because who would it go to, right?
Exactly.
Like, who's
the owner?
Yeah, who's the owner? So I would say like if the state is able to do that, that would be amazing. If not, I think it's fair game, right? Free market.
Well, because if like we're talking about empowering the people, for example, like let's say that the legalization of cannabis in Hawaii benefits the people of Hawaii the most. Like, how would that look? Because I say that because I've heard rumors that, and you could shed some light on this issue, that there are only like 8 licensees to have a dispensary, and then each license is like whatever X amount of locations per license or something like that. So I'm like, well, automatically that means my auntie cannot open a dispensary.
Yeah.
Even if my auntie grows the best buds or whatever, right? Let's say my auntie has the best product. Like, what's her pathway then, like a local person, to, let's say, benefit off this legalization when this rumor I've heard is like there's a bottleneck, or let's say gatekeepers to this path to actually make it profitable?
So this is, we're talking about Massachusetts, how their model kind of incorporates what you're talking about, which is the accessibility to the opportunity for the normal resident, average Hawaii resident who is interested in getting into the market. And, I think there's multiple business models that could be made off of cannabis legalization, as I mentioned, delivery services, whether it's culinary stuff that, people are going to cook you some food with cannabis in it. All of these different opportunities exist where it doesn't necessarily have to have a growing retail type of license to actually participate into the market. But if you're specifically talking about actual growing and distribution of cannabis in the legal market, what that program would be called is more like a social equity or disadvantaged business enterprise. So it's basically if you're from a disadvantaged community and you lived in the area, that you have first kind of dibs to creating a market in that area, instead of somebody coming from Honolulu coming to Waianae and saying, I like open up my own dispensary in Waianae. Like, no, you should open it in Honolulu. And so there could be preferences that could be drafted into the bill that would be able to give Auntie better opportunity. And so as long as it's at least 51% of the ownership is made up of individuals of Native Hawaiian, for example, backgrounds, or, it could even be Pacific Islanders, right? Or Polynesian background. We could preference all of that kind of stuff in the legalization of the bill. And that's where we're going to rely on community, like I said earlier, to be involved in the process. Because if you're not involved, then we're kind of left up to our own decision making, right? To go and decide what we're going to do with this issue. But if we have more voices at the table who are not afraid to step up and talk story and really get involved, then I think that's where we'll have a lot more success.
Okay, so 2024, 2025, Hawaii is looking a lot different than right now, 2023. Is it a foregone conclusion then that there will be dual, as you said, dual use, so recreational and medical? Is it almost a foregone conclusion?
No, I can't say that, of course, because anything's possible.
Okay.
I hate over promising and under delivering, but I can tell you with the utmost certainty that there is massive work being done to try to get something going before January. In terms of the discussion, having a bill in front of us so that we can all digest it and read what this bill is going to be. A pretty big bill. We're talking about like an omnibus bill that would also, it's going to rope into the medical, the adult use. And then on top of that, we're looking at putting hemp into this so that we can kind of just have one governing structure over plant as a whole. And that way there's no back and forth, because that's what has been an issue too, with cannabis and hemp. Department of Ag, with Department of Health, and then of course our Attorney General and our law enforcement agencies, right, having to kind of come up with their own ways to dealing with it rather than coming at it in a leveled or unified approach.
And I think one question everyone's like, I want to know this is like, what are we talking as far as like recreational, like how much can I be carrying?
So I think that's going to be determined by the coalition that's being made around it. I can tell you some of the current
because like
things that we're looking at. Like I said, Massachusetts. In Massachusetts, you can have like 6 plants per household, 6 plants per adult, or 12 plants per household. You can possess 10 ounces and designate 2 caregivers, and then no compensation allowed, and can't consume the patient product as a caregiver. Stuff like that is what Massachusetts is using. Like I said, we're trying to incorporate the best practices that we're seeing across the nation when it comes to this, and working with the experts to make sure that we're drafting something that's fair and balanced and that will be received positively throughout the community. I would like to point out that 70% of Hawaii residents currently support legalization of cannabis. So at that point, I feel like we actually have a mandate as the legislature. If 70% of people in Hawaii want to see something, that who are we to stand in the way of making that happen? I think it's our duty to make sure it's done right and make sure that it's done fairly, so that we can all see the benefits of it, not just corporations that are coming from outside who have all these special interests. I think we need to really put the power in the people's hands when it comes to the cannabis, and how the free market will self-regulate itself once it gets kicked off. If the framework is properly put together, I think that we'll see a successful program.
I think, well, I guess that's part of the reason why you say horizontal is better than vertical, is because, and if we should front run it at the state level before it gets federal, because if federal says, okay, some predatory like Monsanto or somebody comes in, does everything vertical, and it gives the little guys no chance.
Yeah,
I could see that. And then also like the term, for me, like what I know from my experience is like the term personal use, right?
Yeah.
Personal use, X amount of grams, you know what I mean? Like whatever that is. But like having I guess you could say it for alcohol too. Like, why are you buying 5 crates of vodka? You know what I mean? Like, is that personal use? No, there's intent to distribute. You know what I mean? Like, so that's kind of why I wanted to ask about the numbers part of this thing. Like, what? I know it's easy when you have plants, 6 plants per household type of thing. But when it comes to, I mean, personal use, like, why do you have 15 pounds? Type of thing. But then I think what happens is there's no need to have 15 pounds, because you won't find a demand for that 15 pounds if your intent is to distribute in the legacy market.
Because
there's the demand has diluted now. In the marketplace.
And then of course, as the consumer, you want a trusted source. You don't want to deal with somebody coming out of their yard with it, right? And you rather say, I know for a fact this has been tested, it's good, it has the label, it has the seal of approval, and I know I'm getting what I'm paying for. And I think majority of people are gonna be like that. Of course, you're gonna have people who, you know, like Smirnoff vodka, or then Grey Goose, right? Like, so you'll have those guys that are just looking for vodka. They're not looking about the strain or anything special. They just need what they want. So
you're right. And I see a lot of opportunity for licensing as well, where like I've heard, and I can't confirm this, but I've heard Kirkland vodka is Smirnoff vodka in that Kirkland bottle license.
I can see that.
You know what I mean? It's like we're bottling Smirnoff, but we're buying basically the rights to put our label on it. Or so I could see, just in a horizontal view, right?
Yeah.
I could see how that would be a little bit better than a vertical, in that distribution's a little different, and there's a lot of opportunity, access to opportunity. I like that term. Access to opportunity in distribution.
Yeah.
Access to opportunity in manufacturing.
Yeah.
And then also like all the peripherals around, like all the existing places like bars, hotels. You said, Thailand example, like all these existing establishments and venues. Even me, like someone who spent a lot of time in the wedding industry in Hawaii, I can just see how now it could fit into all these different places.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm excited as
cannabis focused wedding.
I mean, like not every, but many, many weddings. Like if you're a vendor at a wedding, you know what I mean? But like there's so many different bar vendors, right?
Yeah.
It's just another thing that a bride and groom are going to be thinking about is, should we have a cannabis bar right next to our, other bar? And they can choose to go to Costco and buy a bunch of liquor because they know they can return the ones they don't open, and then just give it to the people who you hire to be a vendor at your wedding reception. And there could be a similar thing with, let's say, the cannabis bar at your. I know currently right now there already are these activities and venues and meetups, but it's limited by that 328B, right? Oh. So as soon as I stepped into one over here at the dispensary because I wanted to learn, like, hey, I want to get my card. But the first thing, before I could even say hi, it was, hi, do you have your card? Immediate. I get it, right? Like you could probably get in trouble if you let someone in here who doesn't. But like, if that kind of accessibility just blows up to the point where it's at the wedding, it's at, let's say Hilton decides to have like they have every lobby has like a bar or some kind of alcohol access to it. There's coffee, alcohol, and weed. I just don't see how any person in business in Hawaii with visitors and locals frequenting their establishment can ignore this. So I know there's even if you don't smoke, even if you don't get high, you know what I mean? Like I think there's a stigma that's slowly dwindling. Yeah. That's like weed ain't just for people getting high. And a lot of them are those older constituents that are like 60 or something. Yeah. Their job, they don't get piss tests or whatever, or maybe they're retired, service members especially. Like all the service members who can now like not look over their shoulders. Right. That's a huge one. I don't know how that works, state, federal, because
it's so really separate. Yeah, so it's still illegal federally, but it's going to be legal. Yeah, it's going to be legal for the state. But there are, I believe, some exemptions for federal guys. If I think it's under the medical policies potentially. Don't quote me on that, but something to look into if you're a medical, if you want to get into the medical cannabis side from the federal level and making sure your job is
like getting pinched, right? Like the people who got pinched, the people, I feel like this is going to affect them. Bro, damn, it's been an hour. What should we, I don't want to, like, you said you don't want to overpromise, underdeliver, so I won't ask for like hard dates or anything like that, but let's give the people who have been waiting for this some sort of like light at the end of the tunnel message here.
Yeah, so my hope is that the legislature understands the political call to action that had been put upon us by the general public of Hawaii, with a 70% support for cannabis to be legal and have dual use for adults. I think that we have to answer that call with action. And I think by the Senate showing that they're willing to move this forward, that it leaves it up to the House of Representatives for the state of Hawaii to take on drafting something that will actually be successful in its implementation. A lot of times we talk about theory and how things would work in theory, but we want to do it to the best of our knowledge of how it's actually working in action. And that's why we visited these different states to look at their models, as well as look at our current medical operations here in Hawaii and see how we can put it together so that, like I mentioned earlier, win-win situations. And I keep repeating that because that's where my intentions are for drafting a measure to legalize this. And how that process will work is in January, when we have to introduce all the bills that we plan to move for the 2024 legislative session. The bill for legalizing cannabis will be submitted by one of the chairs or the speaker or whoever it may be. This could be even the Senate. And we will be having hearings so that the people can voice their concerns and support or opposition for legalizing cannabis. While we go through those deliberations, we're going to be taking back all of the information that is being shared with us as a committee, as a body at the legislature, and incorporate as much as we can of the voices of the people into the bill that will finally go through all of the committees, pass the House or the Senate, and then it will go through the committees on either House or Senate side again, and then whoever introduces the bill that gets passed will have to do a final reading on it. That final reading happens, we pass it out. The governor will then receive the bill, and the governor will then decide to either pass the bill with his signature, veto the bill, or let the bill pass without his signature. And so those are the three options the governor has once it gets to his desk. And then from there, once that's done, I do want to mention that it will cost money to start a program. And we're hoping to recoup the money that we invest into starting this program back from the applications that are being submitted to apply for legalization and to have a distribution or one of the horizontal permits that will be available. And from there, basically we'll have a set timeline of when we set to go live with cannabis legalization. And the messaging is super important. So I think that we'll be working diligently to make sure our messaging is on point so that, like I said earlier, we don't overpromise and underdeliver and ensure that people are aware of what the criteria are, what's the regulations, and how to be in compliance with being in the market or as a consumer in the market.
And when it comes time for that educational piece,
yeah,
feel free to use this. You know what I mean? Like, because I'm sure that's a huge part, so people don't get the wrong idea or mess up some way. Thanks for laying that out. And you're saying that Governor Green is already kind of committed?
Yes,
so
Governor Green has committed to supporting legalization, and that was one of the big things that we needed to move this forward. And if his administration isn't on board, which they are, we're working directly with his department of his Attorney General's office to craft something that we are working with all of the other departments, like the Department of Health and Department of Ag, to draft something that meets everybody's needs.
Last thing for me.
Yeah.
When I left Hawaii many decades ago, an ounce was like 400 plus. Now it's like 2 something. How do you see the price being affected for the consumer?
You know, I think for the pricing that there is going to be a level of competition that we have never seen before in both the legacy as well as legal market that currently exists now. And I think that's going to make people step their game up and be fair, you know, and how they want to price things out. I don't think it's going to be the case where there's just a handful of people that are going to control the market and set the price points for everything. I think that the market will decide what they're going to pay for what. And, you know, the quality of the products that exist on the market, I think that's going to be a big determination on who will survive, because I think it will also be like other states where there's just going to be an influx of just people throwing their name in the hat to try to get us a store started or a dispensary started. And they're not going to have the expertise. They're not going to have all of the components that you're going to need to be successful in the industry. And I think if they're not able to meet those components, then they're not going to necessarily
survive.
Make it through. I want to try to use. I'm trying to use a politically, you know, make it through the rush, right, of business interest in that industry. So I think it's important that people who are interested in getting involved, that they do their research, that they try to create a team of folks that can help guide them so that they're not just in this shooting blindly, trying to get a hold of a market that may be out of their league. So I think that also one of the things that we can do as the state side is to have the educational component. Like, for example, we can hold workshops, right? People who want to go apply for this, okay, we'll hold a workshop. These are the things that you need to be focused on if you're going to start a company trying to be involved in the medical or the dual use industry. These are the things that we want to make sure you have in place so that you're successful. And we don't want people to waste their money trying to get into this industry and fall flat on their face. So I think that will be something that
that'd be huge.
Keep at the forefront of discussions as we're engaging on how to make this happen.
Thank you for that. Episode 2. No, but hey, man, for real. Thank you for educating the people. Thank you for representing the kind of possibilities that come out of Waianae, Hawaii. And you're just a good dude, man. So
thank you, brother.
Thank you, bro.
A pleasure.
Anytime.
What's up?